Michael's on my bottom left, and then Everest is on my bottom right.
Yeah, you're the chest of the
Michael,
Voltron.
Everest, you guys should kiss.
No, other way.
Other way.
No, this is okay. So am I touching Everest's face now?
No, it's other direction. Yeah.
Okay, I have it like this.
No, Everest. No, you were fine. You were fine.
You're fine.
Like this?
God, you guys are having a really intense. Jesus Christ! From how Michael looks, it looks like Everest is about to eat him.
And I'm just cowering.
Just go to fucking therapy.
If I develop Sims, delete the channel.
We need to start a revolution.
And you know what? I'm gonna say it.
All of them are fucking idiots.
25 is technically you.
Say your morning routine.
And that's fucking it. Excuse me?
Where my Grisha's at? Yo.
I'd like you to rephrase that, Sam.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Dean, and welcome back to the InkGuild Podcast. Tonight, we're joined with Gabe.
Hello.
And returning with us for Season 4, the Soibois. Say hi, guys.
Hello.
Howdy.
Bonsoir, Elliot.
Yeah. So it's Morgan, Everest, and Michael. We've had them on before, and now, I guess if you're watching this on YouTube, you now know what all of us look like. I'm pretty sure I've made it evident with who I look like because I help run social media on the InkGuild, but everyone else we've kind of just been sticking to audio only. And I think for whatever reason we decided to do face reveals today. But yeah, I'm getting a bit.
There's one video on our channel where we kind of showed our faces, and Everest's photo is like from the beginning of like from 6 years ago. So
From 6 years ago.
no, that was a long time ago. That was like the beginning of high school, was it not?
No.
Or is it
The one with me in the sunglasses?
Is that the end of high school? I guess that is. Well, still,
The one with me in the sunglasses, right?
yeah, that's high school.
No, that's like from like a year, maybe 2 years ago.
That's
Was it
not-
those little
no.
clipped out ones where you guys would like paste in between like your videos or something?
The only time these photos showed up were in episodes 1, 2, and 3 of Soibois play Danganronpa H2O, which we're never gonna play again.
Everest. I'm sorry if this is kind of a call out, but is it that one photo of you in the denim jacket that I sent to Genevieve?
I think so.
The one where she's like, Everest looks like he's going to the casino on a Monday night.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I like that photo.
All right.
I do too.
We're already off track and we haven't even gotten under 5 minutes. All right, sweet. Okay, so tonight, everybody, we're going to be talking about video game protagonists. Specifically video game protagonists, as you know, whenever the Soibois come out, we specifically focus the episode on video games. How tonight will work is pretty much how we've been doing our episodes lately. So we'll be splitting discussion largely into main umbrella topics. So first we'll be discussing how video game protagonists are special in a way compared to protagonists in movies, TV shows, books, and other kinds of entertainment. And then we'll be offering up kind of a general discussion on our favorite video game protagonists from whichever kind of era, whichever kind of series. And that's, pretty much how tonight will work out. So I guess with all of that out of the way, let's just dive right in and ask what makes video game protagonists different compared to other media protagonists.
Interesting.
It's a big question. I'm not sure where to start, honestly.
Yeah, well, I guess for me to begin, like the reason why I ask is because as we were planning out, or like as I was kind of planning out the episode, really what makes what has made video game protagonists special for me is the fact that you can control them. Like when I mean by protagonist, I don't mean open-ended lead characters. So, I don't mean like RPG characters such as the Dragonborn from Skyrim, where you basically create your own protagonist, but like a set character's journey already. So like you are Nathan Drake from the Uncharted series, you're Kratos from God of War, Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn, like notable characters with personalities that are the anchor of the story. And for me, what has made these protagonists different compared to other forms of media protagonists is just, again, the fact that you can control them. You dictate what abilities they use. You dictate how they move, how they progress, how they interact with people, especially in RPGs. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of the way to... I guess that's like my way of defining it, but like in the time that I was speaking, did you guys have your own definitions on it?
Or you go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Everest. I was going to kind of come at this from slight academic venue because it's a very open-ended question, but the big one was, of course, that there's a Ludo narrative that you play as the character, and therefore you can impose your decisions onto the character, as well as you can like kind of surrogate those feelings stronger than most other mediums, because in a movie it's someone else, even if it's first person movie, but when it's a game you physically did something. The second one, I'd say, like the second aspect of this two-pronged thing that I think defines a video game protagonist, is that there's also a slight reactionary element to them in the story. Video games aren't just in a vacuum. They have movies, they have comic books, they have all these other mediums that have affected them, and it's a very new medium. So I feel like its greater context along with the agency of the player is what kind of makes a video game protagonist. Mm-hmm. He also should be bald and a space marine and have a gun with a chainsaw on it.
I thought you were going for Halo, but I guess you went for Gears.
I went for Gears, I went for Warhammer, I went for Haze, I went for every game that has ever existed.
You went for the video game Chad.
I went for video game man.
Yeah. I mean, like when you were touching on like it being a new medium, I think like I agree with you, but also to add on to that, like video game stories really have been taking more of a more like important role nowadays, like, or I don't know if important is the right word for it, but basically like storytelling in video games has been more fleshed out, I think, really than it's ever been. Like obviously, to go back to the history of video games, like it started off as very simple things that you could kind of knock out in a day or two. There wasn't any kind of complexity. You were introduced to very shallow characters, like, Mario, for instance. You kind of knew what he was. You didn't really need to know any kind of backstory behind it. But lately, through, because video games has become like a very serious medium lately, like, you'll have three-dimensional rounded characters. You'll have these gorgeous scenes, and you'll have, as we're talking about tonight, compelling protagonists. Right. Yeah,
I'd have to completely agree. I meant more for story content, because video games tend to take so much reference from mediums that have come before. Like I am thinking right now with how there is literally like a video game character idea everyone had in their head when I brought up Bald Space Marine Man, and it literally just came from Aliens. Like that one singular movie has bred genres upon genres in video games. But on the inverse, you are correct that like video games and interactive media has kind of taken hold. I'd say the biggest example would be like the MCU, and how even in passive media like movies, people have become obsessive over like interactivity between the media and the person ingesting the media.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if anyone's case study is Ethan Winters, but we can talk about him being a protagonist right now.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm so fascinated. Like what is there to dig in on Ethan Winters? Because like he's not boring. He just doesn't have a whole lot to him. Like he's a very big vector character.
He's a very Resident Evil character, like a Resident Evil protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing with like Resident Evil, especially with the later games, is at this point it's just a simple like rescue your daughter and like just beat the bad guy. Like Ethan will literally, like, at least in 8, I don't remember much about like 7, but he literally just spouts one-liners. To like
some pretty cringy ones from the clips that I've seen.
Yeah, he does that in Resi 7 too.
They're not good. I will say that.
I think they're funny.
Some of them are funny, and then some are just like, frick you.
The thing with Ethan Winters is I don't think he's designed to really be like a character, so to speak, and more be like a
self-insert.
Not even like a self-insert, but no, it kind of is like a self-insert. That's like somebody that that the player is supposed to like see themselves in, or like kind of like reflect themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at some points it kind of feels like, I don't know how well this analogy is gonna work, but sometimes it's kind of like they're the coaster in a roller coaster. They're just there to take you on the experience, to see all the spectacle and all that stuff. Sometimes you don't really think about the motivations of the characters. You don't really think about the characters. You're just thinking, oh, cool, there's a 8-foot lady who has a butt bigger than the size of my head.
Yeah. Would you say then that Ethan Winters would be more of a passive protagonist? If you guys know what that means?
Yeah, Ethan Winters feels very much like the Luke Skywalker of the new Resident Evil games, where there's so much happening around him and so many people with so much agency and personality. And the most personality I've seen is like in 8, he gets really angry because he wants to know where his kid is. And then in Resident Evil 7, he's really angry because he wants to know where his wife is. And the like comparison is so stark because Resident Evil 8 is just like the new 4. And Resident Evil 4's main character, I would take that man out for a drink. Leon Kennedy seems like the most fun. Like literally when the title card pops up, all Leon can say is, "Where did everybody go? Was there bingo tonight?" Like he's just constantly trying to just chew the scenery, and I don't feel that with Ethan. He's super passive. He doesn't really get up to too much. He stays very passive through the whole game.
Yeah. And I guess for our audience who is listening, for those who aren't aware of what a passive protagonist is, or you know what an active protagonist is. Yeah, I can hear you, Michael. It's just that you're okay, well
There you go, he's back.
Okay. So again, for our audience, for those who aren't aware of what a active or passive protagonist is, in the most basic way that I can describe it, active protagonists, the role of an active protagonist really influences the plot a lot, so their actions pushes the plot along. But with passive protagonists, they may be there, but their actions don't directly push the narrative. It feels like everything has already been happening as these character, or like as this, you know, they may be the main character, but everything else is happening, that if you were to take said character out, the story would pretty much follow along without them. So that is basically what I'm asking. And Gabe, if I can get your touch on this, or if I can get your input on this, actually, when discussing active versus passive protagonists in let's say movies and video games, what do you think on that? Like, what do you think makes a video game protagonist either like a special case of active protagonist or a special case of passive protagonist?
I think it's hard to say, like with video games, because like when you were talking about like what makes a video game like protagonist different, it's like I think there's like an inherent sort of like out of character, like, or sort of out of body experience with them almost, because like I think especially in a lot of like these more cinematic games, which are super popular now, where like everything is like a bulk of the story, if not just like the entire story, is like contained within these pre-rendered cutscenes. The protagonist might not be like in a literal sense passive, at least not in the same sense that they might be in like if in a movie, if the character's a passive protagonist, and that they might be like a detective who's uncovering a conspiracy, and then like they're like learning about stuff that's already happened. That would be like a passive protagonist in a movie or something. But in a video game, there is a difference, I think, because like Ethan Winters being a passive protagonist is like technically correct, because as a player, you don't really like affect much onto the universe. Chris kind of does most of it, but at the same time, Ethan is sort of like, he's sort of an active player in the story in like a literal sense, but it's more that the player, that you as a player are like affecting onto the universe, while Ethan, in terms of just what's contained to the story, is sort of going along for the ride. So yeah, that's my answer.
How far into my ramble did I disconnect?
You didn't disconnect. Like,
I don't think you disconnected at the wrong time. Like you got your input in and then
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
think
So now
something that
we're
helped-
just talking on active and passive protagonists.
I think something with like a passive and active protagonist, like when you think passive, I think the best example is like a Call of Duty or like a first person shooter like protagonist, because usually they're getting like commands from other people. Just go here, do that. Like Modern Warfare 2, one of the most common things you'll hear is Ramirez, get your ass over to
Yeah.
Parliament building. And you just do that. You just do whatever the game tells you to do. You're not really building around.
And I don't always think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, like we've gone over Outer Wilds how many times, and I'd say that's probably like the best example of like a passive protagonist in a video game, because that game's all about like the actual Herthian, the pilot, whatever his name is. He doesn't even have a canon name. He's like
Nothing.
he's a non-character almost, and like when it comes to movies and books, if a character is a passive protagonist, that's almost always like a bad thing. So it means that the protagonist is like, it's very like unpresent in the story and like just unengaging. But in a video game, that can almost work to its benefit in those circumstances, because you can have something like Outer Wilds where the protagonist not really being a character can sort of like allow the player to like immerse themselves deeper into that role, like in a way that you can't really get with a movie or a book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in a way, I guess, like you're right. Like with Outer Wilds, for example, like you don't really need a compelling protagonist to really explore the solar system, which is fine. Like that was probably the purpose of the game anyway, like to have this unknown Hearthian explore the universe, and through your eyes, and through, I guess basically what I'm saying is like, it is definitely a benefit, because then what you trade for a compelling character, you get the chance to explore, like you get the chance to explore this beautiful, gorgeous world that these developers have created, which in any other medium I don't think would work. Like you can't really do that in a 2.5 hour movie. You can't really do that in a 400, 500 page book without boring people to death. Like in a video game, you have ample opportunity to do that, because you have visuals, you have music, sound design, all of these things to make your world as beautiful as possible. And because you yourself, the player, are controlling it, that's fine. Like that's fine to do that. You can have a passive protagonist.
Well, and like controlling it and like experiencing it too. Like there's certain things that you can't really, like Outer Wilds has a really clever thing where it has a very specific sound cue for the big event at the end of the loop, and like by a couple hours into the game, you sort of start to develop like PTSD surrounding the sound cue, where like it starts going off, and you start having like a instinctual reaction to it, and that's something you can't really get with like if the protagonist is like, if you're seeing the protagonist actively respond to it, and you're seeing like their face go like as like stuff is happening, like it's something that's happening to you, and it's a different experience.
Mm-hmm. Everest, do you want to comment on that? Because you were the one who like convinced both of us to play it.
Yeah, like just kind of comment on like the passive protagonist of Outer Wilds, or
yeah, just kind of commenting on what we had already said, like maybe something you wanted to add, or
I mean, like, yeah, I think like kind of go back a bit to when you guys were talking about like how passive protagonists aren't really like are considered bad inside of like when you're writing a story or when you're writing like a book. I think video games are kind of allowed to get away with that a little more, because again, like, and I was kind of going to mention this earlier until we kind of got into this topic, but like, video games are kind of unique in the sense that like a lot of games, not all of them, but a lot of games kind of allow you to almost create your own story for a protagonist.
Mhm.
And so sometimes like a passive protagonist is almost necessary for that to work. And in other ways too, like a lot of games will make you like a very I'm not sure what the opposite of a passive protagonist is.
Active.
Active. Okay. So like for instance, like some games need you to be an active protagonist in order to make it feel like your actions have like effect on the world. But like for instance, like to go back to Outer Wilds, like yeah, I think the passiveness of the protagonist kind of lets you create your own story, and it makes the game feel like that much more special, because I guarantee you the way I played through the game and the way I finished the game is completely different from the way that like anybody else has played through the game and completed the game. And I'm pretty sure like almost everybody could say that like they have completely different experiences, completely different discoveries, and completely different like just like story in like playing the game. And that's part of the reason why I think games like Outer Wilds are so special, because everybody can play the game completely differently and still have like an amazing time.
Mhm.
It's kind of a mix of like Ethan Winters and the Outer Wilds guy. When Gabe was talking about the like style reaction for time loop not instigators, but like signals in Outer Wilds, it made me think exactly like Majora's Mask, and how Majora's Mask has a similar thing. But Link as a protagonist is able to be this incredibly blank canvas. It's just a young child in a fantasy setting with the sole desire to do good, and it gives you the ability to then play the games however which way you'd like, especially like Breath of the Wild, where there's like 100 different ways to finish the game.
Yeah, I was actually going to comment on that too, actually. Like, it's games like Outer Wilds that like definitely, I don't want to say like introduces that, because it is far beyond just an introduction. It's like really one of the best examples of this, but so is Breath of the Wild. Like, from what I know about Breath of the Wild, like it takes the, I guess, Zelda formula, which Michael has described, where Link is a good character and your sole purpose is to save the world, basically. But with Breath of the Wild, it takes that concept and makes it absolutely gorgeous, and really capitalizes on what makes video game protagonists hella cool to write, and like kind of expand on passive or active. But I guess since we're still touching on passive, like there are so many ways that you can explore Breath of the Wild's world, and there isn't really any restriction on that. And keep in mind, I haven't played it, so I'll have someone else elaborate for me. But like, I know my sister, like when she was playing it, her route is likely different from the route that Everest took, or the route that Morgan might have taken, or Michael might have taken. Like, there are so many different ways that an open-ended game like that makes you write your own story, which is hella cool.
I haven't actually played Breath of the Wild. I've just watched a bunch of stuff on it, and I've watched Everest play sometimes. It's a slightly more open version of most sandbox games. So you can think of like your Assassin's Creeds and your Far Cries, where there is a list of items you need to do in an open world with a bunch of other small side missions you can do. But in Zelda, and they have it in all of the Souls games as well, you can do a small list of those things that are story relevant and skip the rest of the game, or just pour the rest of your life into everything else. And both are completely valid ways of going through the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think
Once you do PvP in Dark Souls, then online is just filled with hackers.
Yeah, it's just people with like two giant swords throwing fireballs and flying like monkeys at you.
Oh my goodness. I think, like, Michael, you had mentioned Assassin's Creed, and I think that's a pretty interesting way to transition into talking about more active protagonists. Like we had said, active protagonists have more of an influence, if not the influence behind a narrative. Basically, their actions result in the narrative changing and being, like, basically they're, like, directly at the heart of the story, without being the perfect reason for it. Assassin's Creed, for me, the reason why I say this is because Assassin's Creed has, I think, a really good example of a active protagonist, and that is Ezio. From the Ezio trilogy of the Assassin's Creed games, his actions directly influenced a lot within his trilogy. I can say, like, he within the corruption of Florence at the time, his actions was resulting in a war, basically, and he wasn't just standing by and idly watching everything unfold around him. Like, he was taking direct cause, which stands out for me because in later Assassin's Creed games, most of them just kind of delve into another ancestor, which doesn't really have much of a significance for an overall story, especially for one as long as Assassin's Creed. But yeah, like
I completely sorry. You finish.
No, go ahead. I was pretty much done anyway.
I completely agree. It's very sad how like the first few Assassin's Creed games, like the first 4 or 5, came swinging out the gate where like you basically like finish the Crusades in the first game. The next 2 games, you take down the Pope. In 3, you are like one of the key focal points of the American Revolution. And then from like 4 onwards, it's like, yeah, you're a pirate, but like you're not doing anything of like you do have agency in your own individual story, but it doesn't have the like world bending narrative that Assassin's Creed had built up through your time playing as Ezio, but like playing as Desmond through his ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
Every single person that Desmond played in those games up to the point where Desmond wasn't around in the games anymore had so much agency and gave so much to the not meta story, but like the overarching narrative of Assassin's Creed, where like every single game you were going to find out that some large scale revolution or colonization of a country had these deeper forces behind it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, when it was still Desmond's story, he was pretty much like the main protagonist of the entire story, and like it was through his ancestors that like the early story was being pushed. It was through his ancestors it was through his ancestors and their actions thereafter that were like critical to pushing the narrative along. But in later games, and keep in mind I haven't really kept up with the series since Origins, but it feels like a lot of the protagonists in said games, like especially the ancestors, don't really have that agency, Michael, like you said. But more or less, they just feel like it doesn't really feel like it's active enough. Like, they may be pushing the plot, but there isn't really a means to an end to all of that. Like with Desmond's story, like diving into his ancestors was necessary. The plot beats with said ancestors were necessary, but I don't know what the direction is for these new games.
I completely agree. So like an Assassin's Creed game, you have the melody, which is the time period you're playing, but then the first few games were always sold on that backbeat, which is what is going to happen now, because the point of going into these past times is to see what's going to happen now. But every game post 1100 AD doesn't technically matter, because you understand that the assassins are fighting the Templars and there are good guys and bad guys on both sides, and that there's this weird alien technology they're fighting over. That's set up very easily in these games, and it then kind of leads to everything else being irrelevant. Like, the big question with Assassin's Creed games now are not what's going to happen to these characters. It's not asking what's going to happen to the world. It's asking what period is this set in, and like what can I do as an assassin in these time periods, which was not part of the conversation in any of the first like 5 games up until like 4 started, because you wanted to go like fishing. From a gameplay perspective, it makes the games a lot more fun to play. Like, you definitely have a lot more ways to kill people. You have ships. I think this time you can barter. I think in Valhalla, I think that's the most recent one, you can start like drinking on the spot and not really get in trouble. But like, those are fun gameplay elements. But when you factor in narratives, which are important for people like me, it might be a fun game to play. But like, it's different when you're playing Assassin's Creed versus when you're playing Outer Wilds, because there is a name to your protagonist. I wanted to bring up Samus when you guys were talking about Ethan Winters, because they both reminded me, similar to Link, they all 3 of them remind me of active protagonists that are completely static. So like, they give through the narrative that impression the player can have by having no like personality, no like underlying agency. And it makes me think back to like how kind of like the Assassin's Creed games too, with like a big game versus a small game, how old Metroid games like Super Metroid and like Metroid Fusion, you would have these like galaxy destroying monsters that have the potential to just kill everything. Like in Super Metroid, you blow up a planet to stop the Metroids. In Fusion, there's like a venom style bacteria goo that, or like the thing style goo that can turn into anything, and you blow up this giant spaceship. And then in a small game that does try and bring a dynamic character, but then leads to no agency on the player part, is like Metroid Other M, where more or less the whole game centers around you looking good for your boyfriend. And it doesn't really have too much around like a scary monster or a giant like galaxy ending terror, because it's just the Metroids again. It kind of takes all the wind out of its sails, even though it's got like a more quote unquote fleshed out character.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at these like in our own way, like these active versus passive protagonist case studies. Were there any other ones that came to mind before we kind of move on to something else? Because like, Gabe, how about you? Is there one that kind of comes to mind? Because like,
for active or passive, because I kind of have one. Both of the case studies that I had planned for this episode were kind of fall under both.
I mean, you can kind of touch on, like, if you want to touch on them early, like, without elaborating on too much, because we do have time to speak on, or we do have time to elaborate on them later, but, like, you know, you can introduce it.
Yeah. Well, I think like, I think when it's done right, like, passive protagonists can have, like, a very positive effect for, like, storytelling and gaming. And I'm gonna elaborate on this later because I don't want this to sound like I'm like simping over a generic badass character, but like I think Agent 47 in the Hitman games, especially the recent reboot games, is like the perfect example of like a passive protagonist who is just like functionally and emotionally uninvolved with the story and could not give a fuck, but is a compelling protagonist just through how he acts. And then like as far as active protagonists go, we were talking about Nier Automata earlier. I'm going to talk about 9S. That's just going to happen. I guess I'll get to that during the case study. But yeah, look forward to that. I promise I won't spoil anything because I know, Dean, I want you to have something to look forward to.
It's fine. I think oh, sorry, Michael, go ahead.
I did have one more in terms of active versus passive, and I like it in video games because other mediums can't do this, but the interplay of video games and agency. So like the example explains it much better than I am, but like how when you're Jack in Bioshock and it is clearly shown at the end that you didn't have agency as a character, you were a slave. It has this really interesting like meta conversation on video games because yes, you technically have the agency of a player, but you also have the restrictions of a person put into an environment by a game developer. So you're never technically free, but you're never technically passive.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess while we're still talking on active and passive protagonists, Morgan, was there one that you wanted to quickly touch on that wasn't your case study?
I was just thinking like active, like usually with like active protagonists, I like to think of like the TellTale characters a lot. Whether it be like Lee from The Walking Dead or Bigsby, who's trying to like solve this whodunit mystery. Like they're the ones actively pushing for everything to happen, and even like something like, I guess to go way back in the TellTale timeline, the Back to the Future game. Usually everything that happens in like say the past or the future in Back to the Future 3 or 4, as I'm gonna call it, is because Marty did something, and so he's actively trying to change everything around him, like trying to change the past so he doesn't have a fucked future.
Right.
By the way, play Back to the Future, the movie, the game, or whatever they call it.
The TellTale one?
It is basically a fourth Back to the Future movie. It's really good.
Nice. I think while we're touching on on Telltale. I think maybe it's just because I've only played The Walking Dead, but like they really do know how to make good active protagonists in video games. Like they're the baseline, as we've already said, is the protagonist is the one who is pushing the plot along, and the plot centering around Lee was a really good idea because at the time, The Walking Dead was at its peak, and everyone had favorites between, they had their favorite characters between the show and the games and whatever other adaptation. But in what is essentially now I don't want to say dying, but not least popular genre. But when the era of like zombies was at its peak early in the 2010s, you had to have compelling characters. More so, you had to have a absolutely outstanding protagonist, just because they're the anchor point, like they're the center that keeps your thing running. And The Walking Dead really did know how to do that. Like between the show, arguably early on in the series is when they were doing it the best, and in the video game, season 1, Lee was a wonderful protagonist. Season 2, I think, was Clementine. She was probably the protagonist of season 2. And
2 and 3 was Clementine. 2 is when she was a kid, and then 3 is when she's like a grown up and she's in Lee's position.
Mm-hmm.
And then 4, I think 4 is like a completely different cast of characters, and sometimes Clementine's there.
I haven't played the later games past season 2. Is Clementine's role as a active protagonist still pushed? Because I remember in season 2 she was still very much an active protagonist.
Well, the thing with Clementine, at least like not the final season, but the season before that with like Javier and them, is she just occasionally like showed up. Like it was more towards the end she did have more of an active role, but she would just be like, "Oh yeah, I'm Clementine. I'm here for the season 1 fans, season 2 fans." But like besides that is kind of just, I don't know, because her quest was like, her story didn't really have anything to do with Javier. It was just like, I'm looking for this character, and so she just sometimes showed up. She never really affected the story
in that season.
Yeah, with the exception of like maybe a story beat or two, but besides that, like she had no direct influence.
Mm-hmm. That's a shame to hear, actually, because like we were talking about, if you're trying to stand out in a very what's the term I'm trying to look for, like a very popular genre, you need to have like
market.
Yeah, saturated market too. Yeah, that's also what I was trying to say. Like if you have to stand out somehow, and through your characters, that's how you do that. Right, and I don't know what Javier's story was, but
Javier's story is a soap opera. It is essentially like a Hispanic soap opera, but there's like zombies involved.
Yeah,
the best kind of soap operas.
Yeah,
it sounds like Zack Snyder's new Army of the Dead in theaters.
Should watch that later. Theater? Actually, I've been meaning to watch it. It looks batshit.
It's fucking wild.
I really just wanted to cut Dean off right when he started talking about zombies and be like, "What do you mean antiquated genre? Army of the Dead out in theaters now, baby."
All right, if I can do it in post, we'll see. All right.
I feel like this is one Everest would like, and he know exactly what I'm talking about. Everest could talk about like Portal and how Portal's protagonists are constantly going back and forth from active to passive.
True. Yeah, that's true. You can talk about it if you want. You can talk about it.
You can lead him in.
You brought it up.
So, as far as I know, like even though Chell is the main character in both Portal games, Chell is she does technically the most important stuff in the game. Like she's fighting GLaDOS, which is in Portal this big AI supercomputer that took over Aperture. Like not Aperture Studios, but like it's a laboratories. There we go. Aperture Laboratories. She is technically passive through most of it because virtually the whole game is just the AI messing with her in this I have no mouth and I must scream style torture scenario where she just needs to keep playing these technically really like banal, fun in the video game sense, but like they're these really banal tests that are supposed to just grind her brain to dust. But one day she just breaks. Also dangerous and probably going to kill her. But one day she just breaks out from one of the ones that are supposed to kill her, and she makes it and kills the final boss. But in terms of the narrative, about like 60-70% of Portal, you're just a passive lab rat doing lab rat stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good example. I'm glad you brought that up because that wouldn't have even occurred to me.
Yeah, and then
No
with
worries,
2,
Emily.
it's kind of more the same thing, but with like Wheatley, and then more
Yeah.
comedic fashion.
I think Portal's another good example of like passive protagonists benefiting, or like a benefit to passive protagonists, because it's like there is a narrative there. There is a narrative in the Portal games, but more or less it's solving puzzles with the portal gun, which is fun.
I think Valve in general has mastered like that type of character.
That's what I was gonna say, is that like I think that's honestly the way a lot of like Valve protagonists work. I know like Gordon Freeman especially comes to mind, that like especially in Half-Life 1, like it's like passivity. It's almost like passivity disguised as activity, if that makes sense. Where like in Half-Life 1, like you're just like a researcher, right? Like Gordon Freeman's just a researcher. Bad stuff happens at Black Mesa, and then he's just trying to escape. Like he's just trying to get out and live to see another day. But in doing that, he ends up fighting the Combine. He ends up killing a bunch of aliens, and he ends up doing a bunch of stuff. And then in the second game, it's revealed that he's been like built up as this like legend that escaped from Black Mesa and defeated the aliens and did all this stuff. But like it's and like the way that people speak about it, it seems that he was like an active hero. But in Half-Life 1, like it's really just Gordon like reacting to what's happening around him. Like he's literally just trying to live another day. Like he's not doing it with the hopes it's like, I'm gonna be a hero, I'm gonna save the day. Like he's literally just trying to live.
Bioshock's got that 100% too.
Oh yeah,
It's
true.
like-
Bioshock, yeah.
Infinite's got it so good because it talks about like parallel timelines and like quantum theory, where as the game goes on, you find out that like not only is all of this predetermined, but like every single like piece of propaganda with like real like societal impact is most likely talking about you. So you were already built up as the hero or the villain of the story. You had no like set way to get around it.
Yeah. I think Bioshock also does a really good thing of like just writing these kinds of protagonists in general. Because if we go back to Bioshock 1, there, and you know, feel free to correct me, but like the protagonist of Bioshock 1 feels like he is a very active protagonist, like with the help of Fontaine, I think. But
Yeah,
then
Atlas.
come the big twist in Bioshock, like you kind of then realize that you've just been a passive protagonist this entire time, which is great. Like
Even from like the first time seeing the character, you think that he's supposed to be a man of like the second half of the century. He's got like arm tattoos, and this is in the 1960s, so you can already tell he like feels kind of different. He's wearing a wool sweater and he's on an airplane. And then out of nowhere, you go under the sea and you're back in like the bopping, roaring 20s and 30s. And it just feels so alien. But then by the end of the game, you realize you're just another one of the people down here.
Yeah, they do such a good job with that. Like, I think that twist in general, I think we talked about that before in a previous episode, but like, Everest, it was with you, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned it.
Yeah. Would you want to elaborate on that?
I mean, I think you guys honestly hit the nail on the head. Like, I think anything that I'd say is just pretty much go like a repeat of what you guys have already talked about.
I think for Everest or
I was just gonna say that, like, yeah, like especially I really like the point that you made, Dean, about how like it's at the beginning of the game you're made to think that like you're an active protagonist, and then it's a revelation that like you've pretty much just been a passive protagonist the entire time. Like, yeah, I completely agree. I think it's really well done.
Would you guys say that Bioshock is the ultimate gaslighting simulator?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because it's partially you going through Jonestown after everyone's drank the Kool-Aid, but then you found out at the end of the game that you were actually born on the compound and they just wanted you back at this time.
Yeah.
Something else, which like I know Dean, you're not too experienced with Bioshock. Like, have you played it, or you just know about like the twists and everything?
I've played 1, haven't played Infinite,
okay.
haven't played 2.
So you know at the end of 2 how like there's the big twist where you find out that like you're just another Rapture person. They just sent you up to the surface. But how right after that, and after they have recontextualized the game as you being passive, they then put you into the position of a big daddy. Like you are supposed to then become a big daddy, and a big daddy is like a literal characterization of a lower working class person, a person that is enslaved to their position. They physically become a like deep sea welder.
That's so cool. Good on you, Bioshock writers.
Good on you, Ken Levine.
Yeah.
Bioshock gets the certified podcast approval.
From both.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, from 2 different channels. Yeah. Huge props. I think like just to kind of close out our section, like what makes stuff like the Bioshock twist so memorable is the fact that, you know, like we had said in the beginning, it's the fact that you were the one who was doing all of this. You weren't in the head of, you know, you weren't in the head or over someone's shoulder when you were, you know, through like a book or through a movie or something. Like you were directly the one influencing everything. Like, and you know, granted through books, you're the one who is experiencing things anyway. But in video games, because you are the player, you influence the entire thing by your controls. And that makes like exploring like protagonists in general such a compelling thing, because it's like in no other way can you not just get into your protagonist's head, but really experience everything that you've been doing through through video games. Like you can't really do that in books. Like you can have some kind of investment through a long form narrative like books or TV shows, but I think with video games, like it already has that, plus it has the added agency that Michael said.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't know how to tackle onto that.
You're much better at words than I am, so I will just say that I agree.
Trust me,
There's
sometimes
a reason
I'm
why
not.
we're the video game channel, and you guys are the writing channel, like podcast.
The closest comparison, I will admit though, your guys' articulation on this is chef's kiss.
Thank you.
Love it. The closest comparison I can think in passive media around this type of like getting into person's head, I would say, like the ideas posed in passive media towards the audience is usually about existing, while in video games you can pose the questions about action. So in Bioshock, you have these twists around you doing something of your own will versus you doing something of someone else's will. And then there are I'm specifically thinking of like Shadow of Innsmouth Lovecraftian stories, which were really big in the 20s and 30s because there's a lot of racism back then. And so there's these like big twists in specifically I think it's Shadow over Innsmouth, where the main character goes to this village where he finds out there's fish people, and he's like, oh, that's gross, fish people. And then at the end he's like, wait, but my bloodline shows that I am fish people. And it then like subverts the expectation of the reader of what if I was fish people, instead of in Bioshock where it's like, what if I acted like fish people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you can still have a lot of narrative devices in video game stories, because ultimately, you know, a video game story is still a story, right? But I think, you know, like we had been saying, what makes video game stories more impactful, not just for people who play video games, but for stories in general, is the fact that it puts you into the headspace of your main characters, or of your characters, better than any other kind of medium. Because you listen and you read and you watch the actions of movies, TV shows, and you may be able to sympathize with it. But if you are the one who has to, like pour white phosphorus onto innocent civilians, or if you are the one who has to do something fucking wild in Nier Automata, I imagine there's some kind of crazy, horrible thing that you need to do. Or if you are the one who has to like, if you are the one who has to figure out how or why, like, your solar system is stuck in an infinite loop, you don't get that in movies and TV shows. Like, you don't get that in a lot of other media. They can try, but what makes getting into the head of a video game protagonist more unique and especially more impactful is just, again, the fact that you are the one doing it. Like, you are actively controlling it, and in a way you are more active in the story by being the one controlling the character.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, like, it allows the experience to not only, like, feel more personal, but also just make it feel more like memorable, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's
like
engaging.
there are obviously very memorable stories, but like a good, that's a good word for it. It's very engaging.
Yeah,
more so than other forms of media, I'd say.
Yeah, like, you can engage with the character's emotions, but if you are the one engaging in the character's actions, that's just a whole other thing that video games add or gives players, right? But yeah, I think that's the end of our first discussion. Hi, Dean here. Because we don't have any ad breaks yet, we'd like to share a quick story recommendation for all of you to check out, be it from a movie, TV show, video game, anime, or whatever. Full disclosure, we weren't sponsored by anyone to say this. These are just our personal picks that we decided to shout out on the spot. Since we're talking about video games, I might as well recommend a video game story. I've been playing Nier Automata lately. Like, finally, like, I've actually finally started playing it, and I've gotten through maybe like an hour and a half of it, and I finally understand why everyone fucking loves that game. Like, sincerely, it's so fun. It's so good. Like, characters, world design, soundtrack especially, hella great.
Okay, so I recently watched a movie on Netflix called Army of the Dead by Zack Snyder. It's the dumbest movie I've ever seen, and I think everyone should watch it immediately because it's also the best movie I've ever seen.
Well, I got a PS5, right? Like, on launch. And,
wow.
I've been
Flexing.
needing to get a game. Well, one game, literally one game for a while, but finally been building up the portfolio or like the library for the game, and recently got Returnal.
Oh, never mind.
Ooh.
Which is probably the best game so far, with the exception of Demon Souls on the PlayStation 5.
There's a new game I played a couple months ago that's I'm kind of obsessed with. It's called No Straight Roads.
Yo.
Really good game. It's, I don't know, just like, it's just really charming, and I just really enjoyed like what they were trying to do. It's a game about a rock band that is fighting against a government that is controlled by pop stars, and they're basically trying to fight EDM with rock music.
Right.
And the story turns out to be like more than that, but that's like the main sort of plug of the game. And so all the boss fights are against these different like EDM artists that are based off of different types of EDM, and the boss fights are synced to the music, and the soundtrack's amazing. And I just like thoroughly enjoyed it, and I played it. It's not very long. I beat it in like 5-6 hours, but it's left like a huge lasting impression on me. I want more. I am like big fan of the developers now, and it's a really, really good, nice, quick, charming game.
I was going to plug this comic book that I kept screenshotting and sending to people called Mega Hex. And so it's this like burnout stoner comic starring a group of different magical creatures, and it's a witch and her familiar cat, and so it's Meg, and then the cat is Hex, and they're just like these just burnout stoners that hang out at their like friend's house, and their friends like this owl familiar, and the owl familiar actually has a job, but they just spend the whole time like burning cigarettes into the walls to make drawings, and just like it's a thing where you smoke a joint and then you just exhale into a cardboard tube to remove the smell. And they're just doing that for like weeks on end. That's the whole plot.
So, with all that being said, let's get back to the episode. With all of that being said, let's now move into our, I guess, case studies, as I've been putting it. But really, it's just more like talking points. For our thing, I guess just kind of a preamble for all of us. We can choose to talk about if we if you want to talk about active or passive protagonist, if you want, you don't have to, but ultimately you could just talk about why they're a cool ass character. It's up to you.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. With that being said, I guess the order will be me first, then Gabe, then Morgan, Everest, Michael.
Yeah.
That'll work.
Hey.
Yeah. All right.
Sounds good.
So since I'm starting out, it's hard for me to kind of not acknowledge a PlayStation character because PlayStation has been killing it, admittingly, with single player narratives. I'll go into two actually, and the first one of which is Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn. I guess in the briefest of sentences, I love her so much. Like some of the more small things out of the way, like she has a great look. She has, like she's a great looking character, like, costume wise, and like just in this world that she lives in, she is a perfect addition. She doesn't feel out of place. Horizon Zero Dawn itself is a wonderful game. It is a great open world and very imaginative too. Like it combines so many different aspects of fantasy and science fiction and interweaves it so effortlessly. But I guess that being said, I'll be talking quickly about Aloy. What I love about Aloy is the fact that she is very much a courageous and kind-hearted, but also doesn't take any shit character, which is always a nice thing, which is always a nice character trait to have. I love those kinds of characters no matter what. I think it's Aloy's curiosity that really makes me engage with her, because with a world as curious as Horizon Zero Dawn, it's through Aloy's eyes really that I can kind of both neutrally and through her lens engage with the world. Like I can paint my own narrative of how these things work in this world, but at the same time Aloy's story is the one being told and it's hers that's being pushed. I still haven't really formulated where she kind of fits along the lines of like being an active or passive protagonist, but she does take a very active role for a majority of the story. Through side quests and stuff, you kind of learn more about her and or actually through side quests you learn about the world. You learn that there are people in need of help through fighting the machines and whatever, but you also learn a lot about Aloy, which makes her, it makes her a very active protagonist, because it is through her actions that she is helping a lot of people. And through the main narrative itself, it's just a really not as memorable narrative compared to a lot of other stories that I've played on especially on PS4, but like hers is really about curiosity, and it's diving into a whole new world for a character that wants answers, and that kind of storytelling is like hella cool, especially if you have a really complex, especially if you've introduced a very complex system, world building, all of that. And Aloy is the kind of person that you run along with instead of having them hold your hand.
I was telling Everest about how I was recently watching the GDC's, I think it's 2019 expose on Horizon Zero Dawn, and it's like this 7-hour marathon stream where they had the art directors, they had the animators, they had storyboard artists, they had virtually every big person from every big department of the studio talk about the time from the final Killzone game to Horizon, and how they just wanted to take everything they've done with Killzone and just kind of invert it and blow it all out. So instead of this dark, dreary, not entirely story-based post-apocalypse shooter, they then wanted to go for this lush, vibrant, kind of Cro-Magnon but post-apocalyptic story game. And it's very funny how they really did not have to workshop Aloy as a character. Like she was in the original pitches for the games that they sent to Sony, and then Sony was like, this looks great, let's go for it. And aside from like tweaks to the outfit, they always had that idea that she would be the inversion of what Killzone's characters were. And I think you speak very well to it, that she has so much flesh on her. She feels so real, and the world feels so real when she interacts with it.
Like if Horizon Zero Dawn was more or less just focusing on the world building and the adventures that you can have through a passive kind of character that you kind of create, like if you just kind of created your own character and was asked to explore Horizon's world, that's fine, that'd be cool. But the fact that you had such a grounded, like, three-dimensional character who was vulnerable, who was very susceptible to weakness, who was flawed basically, but at the same time still very badass, makes her not just like, I guess not just a amazing character, but like good representation too. Like we had been, like on our podcast, we love to touch on, representing, and like as a like actual strong female character, Aloy's amazing. Any other talking points about Aloy before I move into my other kind of case study?
I just want to say, I'm sorry, Michael. I just want to say, Horizon Zero Dawn was free for PlayStation Plus, and I forgot to add it to it. I apologize. I have
Project Rip, dude.
Death of a salesman.
I gotta play. I got it in my library. I haven't played it yet though. My brother was playing it though, and he said it's really good.
It's so good.
I was gonna say actually, I wanted to compare it just because the two games came out pretty close to each other, and they were both compared to at the time. But I think that like having a protagonist like Aloy, and like comparing it to a game that came out at the same time, being like Breath of the Wild, that's like I don't think Horizon Zero Dawn would have been like as good of a game as it was if they decided to have a protagonist more like Link in Breath of the Wild. And I think that like Aloy is very much a key part of what made the game so like what made the game. Like I haven't played it yet, so I'm maybe I'm just bullshitting, but I'd like to imagine that it's a pretty good game.
Oh, it's fucking great.
And I heard from reviews that's pretty good. I think Aloy's a big part of that.
Yeah.
On Dean's point of interchangeable characters and character representation, I do quite like it with Horizon how they stuck their stick in the ground and they said we are going to have a new type of character, a type of character that's not really shown in media, along with a new type of like kind of like situation for a character like this to be in. Like we haven't really seen any sort of like female-led post-apocalypse. We haven't seen a lot of female post-apocalypse. We haven't seen a lot of like female pre-apocalypse or prehistorical stories. The most I can think is like, I mean, this game's ripping off Nazca Valley of the Wind like pretty hard, but like you can't say this one comic book from the 90s has that like has like a monopoly on that type of story. But compared to, I'm thinking now like other RPGs like your Skyrims and your World of Warcrafts where you can make the character anything, it does have universal representation because you can make a character that's anything, but I think it's a lot stronger to have a certain type of representation you'd like to make, and then you put that stick in the ground and say this is the spot we are going to take, and then you build on that character. Because if you have the universal representation of any character, you're getting like ankle deep on that character's story, and it's not full representation compared to having a character you want to represent and then going deep on them.
Mm-hmm. Like I'd imagine Aloy as like a actual strong female character, not the kind that they kind of butcher in a lot of narratives nowadays. Like that must be a huge plus for the like for women and female presenting people, because what to not linger on it too much, but basically Aloy is an actual amazing female protagonist. Like there are a lot of negative connotations when you bring up strong female characters. Like they typically kind of go one way with becoming a Mary Sue, which I'm pretty sure you guys are likely familiar with, but for everyone who's listening who isn't, they're basically just like absolutely perfect. They aren't really like, they're hardly ever flawed unless it's a physical flaw, or like unless it's a physical flaw or like just a like some kind of weak character flaw. But like Aloy's curiosity gets the better and worst of her. Her bravery gets the better and worst of her. She is a flawed character, and when writing compelling characters in general, you need to acknowledge said flaws. So that's why, as like Michael was saying, like you can't. I don't think. Yeah, I agree. Horizon would not have been the amazing game that it was had Aloy become an interchangeable character. Speaking of which, as I was talking about a completely fresh and new IP, my second case study will be touching on a very familiar character that originated in comics, and that is Peter Parker.
Who?
I'm talking about who? I don't know. Yeah, so obviously Spider-Man got his own adaptation, or got his own video game from Insomniac, and holy shit, it is.
Yeah.
He is. I think I've said this. I don't know if I've ever said this before, but he is my favorite, or he is my second favorite adaptation of Spider-Man that I've ever seen. First one is, or like Spider-Man, the persona, like the one who embodies it the best for me is Miles Morales from Into the Spider-Verse, and right below him, like maybe a step behind him in second, is Peter Parker from the game, because as an active protagonist, you push the narrative along and really capture what it's like to be Spider-Man. Like the movies, comic books, TV shows, like written media in general and visual media in general, like show you what it's like to be Spider-Man, but being able to swing from building to building in New York effortlessly and actually be Spider-Man is the fucking best. It is the absolute fucking best. Like no other, like it's almost like the game, like it's definitely that the game understands the character of Spider-Man, and not only that, but also understands the character of Peter Parker, who doesn't really change from his comic book counterpart. He is still a very emotionally vulnerable character. Like there are moments where he gets absolutely furious. There are moments where he is emotionally unstable and weak, which makes Peter Parker, the character, like still one of the best Marvel characters for almost everybody. Even though he's aged up, which isn't a problem, but like as a protagonist, Peter Parker in the game has an amazing narrative. Like through, like it doesn't ever really feel passive at all sometimes. Like there's an underlying thing with Norman Osborn and Otto Octavius, but that doesn't ever really, that's just an underlying thing. It only really gets worse through Peter's help, I think. And I think that's just the main narrative. Like everything else, really, Spider-Man is at the heart of all of these stories. Like Spider-Man, the character, is at the heart of these stories. And like I've said, Insomniac absolutely knew what they were doing when creating Spider-Man. Like they knew the character, they knew the persona, and like, again, gameplay wise, being able to web sling like between buildings is hella fun, but also just Spider-Man is this slick, agile combatter was great. They really got the gameplay good, and like they show so much of the personality too through like wrestling moves, which was early on. Like, I'm not sure how much of a wrestler Spider-Man was in the comics, but like that's a nice touch, I think, to Spider-Man 1, where it was like, oh, Spider-Man's in a wrestling ring. That's sweet. Like it captures like the flashiness and the camp and occasional fun that the Spider-Man character has, and it's like I think the best way of like people understanding who Spider-Man is. Like I have a family friend whose kid is give or take like 3-4 years old right now. He always, like, since COVID started, he's been wanting to come back to my house and play the Spider-Man game that I have, because he's obsessed with Spider-Man, and he's always like, oh, can I come play the game at your place? And like, I hate to turn him down, because like, I absolutely understand it's amazing. And like, for him it's fun, but like, I can't wait until he's able to comprehend just how great the story is and how wonderful of a character Peter Parker is in that game.
That would be such a perfect game to show a little kid, because I think something that's kept Spider-Man so universal is this is going to flow really well into something I wanted to say halfway through your part, but how Spider-Man is so easy to read in broad strokes, but also is amazing at like an intricate, deep, minor level. So like specifically, I think it's really funny that they put he's a fan of wrestling. That makes sense. He's a guy in his early to mid 20s. He's in New York. Like, that's just a fair thing you can say. But there is like real almost century old idea around that. So it might not be century old, but like, it's been around since Spider-Man started. So in the first Spider-Man comic, Spider-Man needed some money, so he gets bitten by the spider. He's got the superpowers, and before he goes off to be a superhero, he wants to go make some money. He sees a wrestling tournament where he needs to fight this guy in a wrestling match and win, and he wins. And there's this whole back and forth with the guy not giving him all the money because he won, and then there's a guy who comes to rob the wrestling place. Spider-Man doesn't stop the guy, and that guy shoots Uncle Ben. And that's the original comic story, and you can see it in the Sam Raimi films as well. It's been remixed 100 times, but I love the idea of throwing in he would be a fan of wrestling. He would have to know about that wrestling match. Like, it's a fair thing to add to the canon. And even for like a 3 or 4-year-old, you could still just understand Spider-Man loves wrestling.
Yeah. Like, he's just a universally, like you said, he's such a universal character. Like, between adaptations, it's like capturing, like trying to understand Spider-Man is one thing, but like the fact that you're also able to capture Peter Parker, oh god, it's great. It's why I love Spider-Verse Miles, because they also understand Miles.
Oh yes, they do. As someone who has played a bit of the new Spider-Man game, the Miles Morales game, they essentially just like kind of inserted the Spider-Verse Miles and made him into a playable character.
Mm-hmm. Everest, were you gonna say something? Sorry, I was.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I was just gonna say that I think it's a testament to like how effective they were at creating like specifically the Spider-Man that we see in the Insomniac game. That like, you know, Spider-Man's a character that's been done to death. Like there's so many different incarnations of Spider-Man, and yet the version in the PS4 game still feels like, I wouldn't say new, because obviously it's reusing ideas from the comics, but it feels fresh. Like, it doesn't feel like it's overstepping or it's like repeating Spider-Man, like representations of Spider-Man that we've seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a real testament to like how just how well they made the character for the game.
Anyway, I guess those were my case studies. I don't really have much else to kind of elaborate on them. They're wonderful characters in wonderful games.
Wait, one more thing. Dean, do you prefer Peter Parker's original model, or do you like his new model that they gave him for the PS5 release?
Original.
Okay, good.
Nothing against whoever made that decision. It was probably like a corporate decision, but like I empathized and engaged with original model.
I mean, he's supposed to be like out of college, right?
Yeah, he's supposed to be a graduate.
Yeah,
he's supposed to be post college, and in the PS5 release, he looks like he's like modeled after Tom Holland, like obviously, but
like just starting
that's like
college.
high school era.
Yeah,
like he looks prepubescent. Like,
I just looked this up. This is blowing my mind.
Oh, you didn't know about that?
They're trying to make Peter Parker look like the guy from Chaos Walking. It's so weird.
No,
they're trying to make him look like Nathan Drake.
They're trying to make him look like the guy from Devil All the Time. What's up with that?
Like, what do you call it? Scott the Woz? He kind of looks like Scott the Woz. Scott the Woz is like a year younger than most of us.
Hey, y'all, Spider-Man.
Oh god, deep cut.
Yeah.
What do you mean? He has like 2 million subscribers.
I don't know why Scott the Woz is always a deep cut to me. Scott the Woz is never like, I don't know. He's always a deep cut to me.
Mm.
I wish I could be a hipster. It's like, hey guys, have you heard of a Scott the Waz? Yeah, he's pretty underground.
He got this great catchphrase.
Yeah. All right, that was our thing on Tom Holland, I guess. I guess now let's move on to Gabe for his case studies.
Real quick, I was just gonna say.
Scott the was.
Mine was gonna be Scott the
I was just gonna say real quick: is the PS5 audio like too bad? Is it interfering? Because I can move.
I can't hear
Not
it
at
at all.
The only thing I heard was it turning on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Heard the ping and that's it.
Okay.
Some person who's listening to this who has like a PS5 or PS4, they're gonna turn around being like, "What the fuck is my thing?"
I'll apologize in advance if the audio sucks.
Yeah,
but
No, yeah, you're good. You're good.
it's all good now.
Meanwhile,
then.
dude, you should
Yeah.
just put random like Discord notification noises.
See, no, that's the thing, because sometimes when we were still like early on in the session, like someone who joins the chat accidentally, like I would get the Discord ping on it, and I was so worried about editing that, or like leaving that in. Ultimately I did, but I was worried about someone leaving that in because it's like, oh fuck, I might like startle some like 12-year-old gamer from their Discord notifs. But yeah, like I've also gotten emails and like the thing, I've also gotten email like pings and just it's fine. It's a roundtable podcast. This kind of shit happens when you're just talking with friends, right?
Oh yeah.
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 So anyway, Gabe, your case studies.
Yes. Scott the
Okay,
Waz.
so my first case study is Scott the was. No, okay, so my first case study, like I said earlier, it's Agent 47 from the Hitman games. I don't know if I've talked about the Hitman games before, so I haven't really had an opportunity to, but the Hitman games are like no cap my favorite game series ever. I adore those games. And like Hitman's always, Agent 47 has always been like he's a protagonist and he's there, but it's not until IOI's recent reboot games. I can't remember what they call it. It has a very long name that I'm not going to refer to it as. I just call it the reboots.
Yeah.
But they've sort of given like 47 a new coat of paint as a character, and it's sort of like really illustrated why it's one thing to have like to talk about like why certain characters in video games work but they wouldn't work in a film, but it is another thing to have like a character who's been attempted to be adapted by Hollywood several times and each time fail miserably because he is fundamentally untranslatable to film. Nothing about like what works as him as a character in a video game works on film, because like Hitman, you can look at the Hitman games and be like, oh, Hit 47, he's such a badass, he's so cool, and like completely let the real gem of his character slide over you, because the real gem of Agent 47 is this insane slapstick comedy, like pitch black humor, fucking lunatic in a business suit as like a cosplay fetishist running around the world strangling people.
I've never heard him be put that way, and I love that description of him.
You gotta see him in like the chicken suit or the bunny suit.
You gotta see him in the chicken suit. You gotta see him in like the crazy, the ridiculous outfits that he puts on.
Clown suit's my favorite.
Yeah.
I think Absolution was the best for that, because there's the one level where you could start off with the Lucha Libre costume.
I haven't ever played any of the games, but I just fucking love seeing Agent 47 no matter what in these stupid outfits with the coldest of expressions.
That's what I was gonna get to. It's always with like Hitman is probably one of the best examples of ludonarrative harmony that I have ever seen with a protagonist, because like the way the games are the way the games are built, like you can go through them if you want to not have fun. You can go through them and try to get a perfect score and try to be a silent assassin and try to let's do some Galaxy Brain plays. You can do that if you want to not have fun. But if you want to have fun, then you can play this insane murder simulator where you basically take control of like this crazy Terminator with no social skills whatsoever, like right down to his animations. There's a great video. I can't remember the title of it, but I'm gonna send a link, and it goes in detail about how like 47, like right down to 47's animations. He is like this extremely robotic character, but in a way that you can tell is like deliberate. Where like there's a mechanic in the recent Hitman games where you can blend into a certain situation to sort of like make yourself like not in like sort of quote unquote inconspicuous, but each time without fail 47's attempt at being inconspicuous is fucking hilarious because this man can't be inconspicuous. If he tried, he tries to like lean on something and like you can tell there's like no instinct to like lean or be comfortable in his brain. He firmly grabs like the bar on a fence and like just throws his entire body into it in like the most hilarious way possible. And this has been like more of a new edition where he has like dialogue and he has like a lot of like interaction with his the people that he's killing. And like whenever you're in these hilarious costumes, you'll always have an opportunity to like say where he says something stupid and ironic to like the person because he just he loves murder so much and he can't fucking help himself but to loudly tell the people that he's about to murder them. Like if you're ever disguised as like a chef or like a server, he always every single time without fail says that it's to die for. A personal favorite is like another personal favorite is like there's this one level where you have to like dress up as a tattoo artist. That's another thing. There's always like celebrities in a lot of these levels that you can disguise yourself as, and people will be like, "You don't exactly look like how I remember you. In fact, you look nothing like how I remember you from television." But whatever, I'll let you get extremely close to me personally. And you have to dress up as like a celebrity tattoo artist, and like basically. And like there's this one section where like he's like the guy you're tattooing is like fidgeting in his seat, and 47 is like, "Please don't move so much. I wouldn't want to accidentally stab you." And then like a bit later, the guy's like, "Do what you do best, man." He's like, "With pleasure." Another personal favorite. This one makes me lose my shit every time. There's this one level where you have to like dress up as a medic to give a character a checkup, or like give a character like an IV drip, and like the character will walk up to you and will be like, "Okay, so what is this you're about to give me?" And 47 lists off the ingredients of the poison that he's about to inject into her, like bold faced, and she's like, "Isn't that poisonous?" And he's like, "Yes." And she's like, "Okay, should I be worried?" And he deadass says, "I'm not." It's fucking marvelous. It's one of the funniest, weirdest, most insane characters that I've ever seen. And like, I yearn for the day that if we ever do get another Hitman movie, they understand what it is that makes him good, and they don't just try to make him like a bald Jason Bourne, and they make like a weird slapstick comedy movie, because that's the gold of the series for me. And like that's why, even though he's like he is an unpresent protagonist, there's one section in the most recent game where it tries to like give you the impression that he has guilt over what it does, but it doesn't really work when I know that every person he's killed, I've personally done it with a fish. But outside of that, like little bump in the road, it's just this insane, uncaring character that you basically control a Terminator, and it's fucking wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, that's why Hitman's Absolution story does not work whatsoever.
I know with Hitman specifically, and with Agent 47 too, I think that like he is shown to be this like psycho killer, but I think there's also like a lot of like characterization that you can get from seeing like the little interactions he does. Like, yeah, obviously you can tell that he takes a lot of enjoyment from killing people, from all the jokes and all the little things he puts into his dialogues. But I know specifically I saw in, I think, the most recent Hitman game, there's actually a couple scenes where like it's like he's like surprisingly down to earth with people. Where like specifically there's one scene I think in the new game where like there's in one of the levels you can blend in by just like chilling on this ledge, And if you decide to blend in and chill on this ledge, there's actually a lady there that will start talking to Agent 47, and she'll talk to him about how like she's having a bad day and how just things aren't going her way. And he will actually like console her if you stay there for the whole dialogue. And he will tell her like, oh, don't worry about it. Sometimes you have bad days and stuff like that. And so I think like little scenes like that also help to just like develop the character that much further. And it's something that's like could completely be missed by players and will likely be missed by a lot of them. But like I love little details like that just add that much more to the characterization of Agent 47.
Yeah, it's nice that he has so much nuance.
This makes me so inclined to check out the Hitman games, which I know nothing about, but it reminds me very much of. I rambled enough about it last time, but like Doom and one of my favorite movies, American Psycho, where they turn this reveling in a just absolute sociopath's desire to hurt others into just the most like the goofiest slapstick comedy possible.
Yeah.
Where like the determination of the agent in the story, the person with agency, like the protagonist to just go through with some sort of act of violence and then everything else happening in between being superfluous. Like in Doom, you have it where like you'll just take like a robot spider and you'll just like beat him to death with his own leg, and it's just hilarious. In American Psycho, they have it where like Christian Bale is running around an apartment naked with a chainsaw and Nike Air Force Ones on, and then in Hitman 47 or in Hitman games, you have this like stone-faced killer, but he's dressed like a party clown.
Yeah, like I think when you were talking about Doom, Michael, just one little thing, but just like they didn't have to do this, but I'm happy that they gave Doom guy nuance. Was when he got a little doll of himself, fist bumps in, then loved that. It's little things like that where like especially in video games they don't have to do this, but they're almost deliberate. Like like to a degree, it's more or less just something for us. Right, like it's a fun moment, right? Like, but like that also tells a lot about Doom guy, right? And maybe that's just kind of looking too much into it, but it's just like it's a fun moment, right? Like even a demon slaying badass can have fun, maybe even be a bit vain.
It would startle you how many of those are in the Doom games, because I really do like how many game series are doing this now. Like ever since the Mario movie came out and Mario's canon name became Mario, it seems like every single game series that's over 25 years old wants to keep to everything in the canon. So like Mortal Kombat has somehow fit in all like 20 games and all like 100,000 battles into the canon and the Justice League and shit. And then Doom has put in everything, which is amazing. So like they have the canon where Doom guy is angry because demons killed his pet rabbit. They have it where Doom guy plays guitar and he has a guitar room in his space fortress. Doom has a computer where he can play Doom, like old Doom. They like you saw that one scene where he like does the fist bump with the doll, but they have been putting those in time after time, and they are very deliberate because they want to clearly show that Doom is not like a hate simulator. It's just a really, really intense slapstick comedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like to tie it back to what Gabe was saying, like little moments that just add more to a character, and like however said, it characterizes them a lot better. Love that. But yeah, Gabe, you had another one, right?
Okay, here's the thing. I changed my mind. I was going to talk about 9S. And then like at some point halfway through while we were talking about Aloy, I just decided like I think number one, you're playing through Nier Automata right now. I kind of want to save like 9S discourse until after you've completed that all the way through, because even if I avoid spoilers, I don't want to talk about what makes the 9S route so good. That's something I want you to experience on your own. And also I just realized I remember there was a protagonist who I was like thinking about talking on this episode, who I still want to really fucking talk about, because I think he's also a great example of ludonarrative harmony, and that is Jin Sakai from Ghost of Tsushima.
Another game I haven't played.
You've got to fucking play it. Ghost of Tsushima was like, barring barring like Hades, like was the best game that I played in all of last year.
Oh,
Like,
Hades is awesome.
I uh so like on a story level, like Jin Sakai is probably one of the most compelling protagonists like I've seen in a video game since. Well, not like one of the most, but he's an extremely compelling protagonist. I was originally going to talk about Arthur Morgan on this episode, but I elected not to just because I feel like everyone loves Arthur Morgan. I can't say anything about Arthur Morgan that hasn't already been said by literally everyone in the world. But Jin Sakai does sort of fall into that archetype of like these tragic protagonists who are like not just like tragic because bad shit happens to them and life sucks, but like tragic because you're really watching a character who's like well intentioned and like is like you can tell like is a good person in the core of their heart go down this like really fucked up path, and a lot of it is like your own doing and you're actively controlling it. But what I think Sucker Punch does with Jin Sakai as a video game protagonist and more than just a cinematic cutscene protagonist that elevates it beyond even Arthur Morgan, I would say, is that there is this extremely clever like gameplay aspect towards Jin Sakai, which is that a lot of the times in video games, I mean, like a tangent just for a general criticism I have towards the industry, a lot of the times in video games when it tries to do like the whole, oh, you can play this game stealthy or action if you want to, there's usually only like one way to play it that was actually the intentionally designed way, and the other way sucks. I'm looking at you, every Ubisoft game. But what makes Ghost of Tsushima cool is that both the stealth and the action are very well designed, they're very competent, and they're very fun to play. But if you play it on the difficulty settings that I did, then the action gameplay and like trying to play it like a samurai warrior will fucking kick your ass. And that game will grind you into the fucking dirt, especially if you play on the mode where if you get hit once, you die instantly, which I did because I'm a masochist.
Nice.
No, that's how I played too. It's the best way to play.
It's the best way to play.
You feel panicked in the middle of a battle, like fuck, looking for
you do
archers.
And when you play it on that mode, it sort of has this weird sort of like meta effect where a part of you wants to get good, a part of you wants to like overcome this struggle, but then a part of you in the back of your mind, just like Jin Sakai does, knows there's an easier way. I know that I have fucking poison darts and knives and daggers, and I could just go through this camp without anyone noticing me. And like you do that, and just as Jin Sakai has like this sort of shame because he's betraying the samurai code, as like a player, you're also feeling like you're sort of betraying yourself and you're sort of fucking up your own experience by having like a way easier handheld experience because like you opted out of like having the more difficult option, which I don't know if that was intentional on the part of Sucker Punch. I guess I'll never know because I don't work for Sucker Punch and I'm not a part of that team, but I do think that it definitely it elevates how you engage with the story on another level if you're like kind of feeling his struggle and you're kind of feeling like his how easy the temptation to just to do things in a quote unquote dishonorable way instead of like the kind of the more badass noble way.
Well, I know with Sucker Punch games specifically, like I always like to think, I haven't played Tsushima yet, but I always like to think about the Infamous games because I love those games. And the Infamous games, like their big main gimmick was always, like the morality system. It's like, oh, you can be good or you can be a hero or you can be infamous. And but the issue that always arose with the Infamous games is that like you kind of had to make a choice where it was either you're ridiculously good to a fault or you're ridiculously like comically evil. And there's no in between. And if you try to do like a mix of both, you just end up with kind of a boring game because you don't get any of the cool late game powers that you get from investing into like one morality specifically. And so I think with Ghost of Tsushima, it was really brilliant of them to kind of take that morality system from Infamous and kind of tie it into this idea of like the code of the samurai and the code of honor, because that's what being a samurai is all about. And so this idea that's like you can choose to be honorable and choose to be a samurai, or you can choose to fight with dirty tactics and you lose that honor. I think it's a way. I think it's a way more interesting and like honestly brilliant way of them to incorporate those sort of like morality system ideas, but without doing like a clear morality like you're ridiculously evil or you're ridiculously good.
I also think that there is, speaking of older problems, like Infamous was Sucker Punch, right? Like they did that, and then they did Ghost. But I was just thinking of other developers that have fallen into that pitfall with Dishonored, and how Dishonored has like a number counter where there's a very small amount of people you're allowed to kill if you're going for the good ending, and then if you kill like one or two more than that number, then it somehow leads to this logistical problem where there's too many bodies leading to too many rats leading to a world plague, and it instead just feels like really goofy inventory instead of any type of like moral quandary. I do completely agree with Everest though. It's so brilliant to tie it into like social code of the samurai and to like Japanese feudal norms. I think it's so weird that video games always kind of shy away from that type of like social accuracy with a time period, because there's so many interesting ways you could have a moral mechanic play into the ethics of the time. It's exactly what Tsushima does, because Jin Sakai never thinks twice about killing any Mongolians. There's never like any type of humanizing of the Mongolian invaders. They never show like Mongolian women or children. They go like exclusively from the point of view of Japan during that time, whereas a bunch of big burly guys with like bows and arrows and clubs came and just took the land. And the moral quandary comes from doing it the way that Japanese people back then would have fought the Mongols versus to how it would be more efficient. And I think that would be interesting, because we were talking about like Assassin's Creed in different time periods, if we had those types of moral quandaries based on the time period.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. Yeah. I wish I
would
played
love
it,
to say more, but I haven't played.
Yeah, literally not played.
It's visually stunning. That's all I was.
I would highly recommend it. Yeah, it is outside of the protagonist. It's one of the most visually stunning and like enjoyable games I've ever played. The way the gameplay is handled, the way that like the actual swordsmanship in that game is handled is like I remember when it came out, I remember people were like accusing it of being like too bare bones, which I would personally disagree with. Like it's not Dark Souls. It's no Dark Souls, but it's like it is definitely not just it's not a Bamham. It's not sword Bamham. It is you have to like, you can't just mash buttons in that game. It is a game where you have to concentrate or you're going to fucking die. And it's
stuff like that like separates it from games like Dark Souls, right? Like
No,
adding
go ahead.
No, well, I was just saying, like, adding in stuff like that, it just separates it and makes it more unique. Like, there are so many visually stunning games out there, and there are so many games that play well, but when you have that complex morality system that ties into history like that, and apparently ties into it, like, really well, that just makes it, like, very treasured among gamers.
What I've been thinking about this as we've been talking about this, like, this just occurred to me as we were talking about this, but, like, it's interesting that Sucker Punch is so like prolific for having like they have like a morality meter in the Infamous games, but Ghost of Tsushima doesn't have like a meter. It doesn't have any morality system at all. But the thing that you run the risk of when you're developing this game, where like the morality in the story is sort of based on like whether or not you're going to be an honorable samurai or if you're going to resort to like dirty tactics, is that you really run the risk of like having ludonarrative dissonance, because if you go through the game and you try to do like a hard like combat playthrough, you're going to inevitably run into an issue with the cutscenes where people will be talking about Jin Sakai as the ghost, and like you're your not father will be like chastising you for betraying the samurai code, even though you as a player would know that you've never done that. But I think Ghost of Tsushima, again, I think it avoids that by making the combat so difficult that it's almost this very risky gambit that the game does that pays way off, where it's like the game knows that inevitably you're gonna break the code. It knows that inevitably you're gonna take the easy way out. You're gonna run into something that's just too difficult. You're not gonna have enough health ups. You're not gonna have enough tools to do it stealthy. You're not gonna have enough you're not gonna have enough to do it like the honorable way. You're gonna resort to dirty tricks, and it doesn't need like a morality bar to know that. It's sort of the way it's designed. It knows that you're gonna go down the fucked up path inevitably, and it like steers you down that way. And I just think that's like super ingenious.
They do have a really nice turning point in the game where I'm not going to spoil it for people who haven't played, but there is a turning point where like in the story and cutscenes it shows that like there's this single part that's too much for Jin, so he does go the dishonorable path, but they build it up throughout the story to be so justifiable to when you get to that point you're like, of course I'm going to do it the cheap way. I'm killing these people that are trying to poison the water supply. I think it's worth it to kill them. Ghost of Tsushima is fantastic. It stole my girlfriend and I's last summer because we just went through and just did the whole game top to bottom. I think one of my favorite things is I'm thinking of how rarely, same as the like melodrama leading to an original like moral system in a game. I'm trying to think of the last really great side mission I saw that just resulted in like the main character just chilling, drinking with people. And there's a side mission in Ghost of Tsushima where you just end up like drinking sake with a friend of yours after a battle. And I think that's really commendable because we don't have enough protagonists that are just chilling.
Yeah. We need more chilling protagonists.
We really do. Yeah, just let them vibe. All right.
I'm done with Jin. I'm done with Jin Sakai. I've talked about this man for long enough.
All right. So then, with that in mind, let's move on to Morgan.
Okay, so just a heads up. This is gonna be a spoiler warning for like a 2009. So pretty old game. And
what game is it? You should just say what it is.
Silent Hill: Shattered Memories for the Wii, PlayStation Portable, I think, as well. So the whole gimmick with Shattered Memories is that it makes a big deal. Like it psychologically reads you, and it'll freak you out based on that. And so essentially, what it does is you'll during like in between the exploration parts of the game, you do these like little therapy sessions, and a therapist will just give you some like questions, some activities to do, and based on your like results, the game heavily changes throughout that. Like sometimes it's like, okay, this is like a really shallow example, but there's a part where you just gotta color in this fill in the blank like coloring book page, and like the house changes on like what you color. But I guess something more like more deep is during because the ending is affected by these actions, and so some of these actions, like with the main protagonist Harry, will affect the ending. Like, hey, were you looking for your missing daughter through, say, this cafe, or did you go through this bar? And then your therapy sessions will result in what kind of place this is. Like, is this a sports bar, or is this kind of like a more risque, like strip like joint type of situation? And it's the best way of kind of just having like character action affect your story, because it's literally you're almost kind of self-inserting yourself into Harry. That's kind of like what the game's asking you to do. And I know we were talking about like active and just like passive characters, and in a way you kind of think Harry is a pretty active character because he's looking for his daughter. He's going through all these trials and tribulations, But you find out at the end that the therapy sessions were actually through the mind of his daughter, Cheryl, because the way the game starts, I should have gone through this, is you go through a car crash. And so Harry actually dies in the car crash. And so the therapy sessions are just kind of like Cheryl just going through the trauma of all that as like a 20-something from like 15 years ago. And so all those like events, like Harry going through trying to save his daughter, is actually kind of like the mindset of like, oh, what is like, that's kind of like what Cheryl views him as. Oh, that's what my dad would do. That's what my dad, how my dad would try to save me. And so you realize you're not an active character. You're more of a passive character. You're going through the mindset of Cheryl Mason and not Harry Mason. And it's kind of stuff like that that just blows my mind. I'm doing a really bad job right now describing just how amazing Shattered Memories is and how amazing like the storytelling is within the game. So you should play it for yourself. Get yourself a Wii or a Wii U, and pick
If
up the
those
game.
still exist somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Wii's are probably cheap on eBay or something.
Likely,
These
yeah.
are like $5 for a baker's dozen on eBay.
Yeah, exactly. And Shattered Memories is not a rare game.
Mhm.
It is also, in my opinion, the most underrated Silent Hill game.
I think my favorite detail is always it always aggravates me in a horror game where they have only one enemy. There's also another spoiler for Shattered Memories. There's only one enemy in the whole game. It's a mob of enemies, and they are called Rorschachs. And so there's all of these great like there's a lot of great iconography and random intermingling of ideas around a therapy session, because like Morgan said at the end, you find out all of this has been through a therapy session. And so I love how they are Rorschachs. They are these blank humans. They look like a human with just like copy and pasted like stomach skin all over their body. They have no facial features. They have no nails. They have no belly buttons or genitals. They start off as just these blank canvases. And so based on your answers, they will move to certain directions. So like if you use the Wii cursor and you look like the women in the game up and down, they will become voluptuous. If you if you are like more aggressive and violent, they start to gain the aspects of like brutalist architecture, where their like chests and heads start to gain these like very blocky architecture looking pieces. And that's very funny because they are Rorschachs, and the name is supposed to sound like Rorschach, which is that ink blot test that you look at, and then you can figure out from what you interpret on these things what you are feeling and thinking.
And just like a heads up with the with those enemies, I'm pretty sure they appear just after you do a Rorschach test.
Is that actually what happens?
I'm pretty sure that's what happens.
That's funny.
Well, I guess in listening to that, Morgan, it kind of like how Harry kind of fits into the active and passive role. He kind of feels like what we were talking about earlier when it came to like passive protagonist kind of being a little bit more of a gateway into the world itself rather than the protagonist being a more active character, which in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially from what I know about Silent Hill. Like Silent Hill is a game that like really fucks with you sometimes. Like I've been knowing that for a while, and though I haven't played any Silent Hill games because I'm a pussy, I think more or less just like being able to like experience just experience the fuckery that is Silent Hill through the lens of a character. Like through an active character is one thing, but like being able to like really envision yourself in said situation, like you're given the bare bones for a character's motivations, but ultimately it is you who is the one who is experiencing all of this, which in itself is not a bad experience in the slightest.
Yeah. Oh, also
you should definitely.
Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I was just gonna say Dean should try Shattered Memories. It's like probably one of the, if not the least scary Silent Hill games.
It's not as scary. It's more for its story.
All right. Well, if I can get my PSP
really
working.
It's this really good like psychological thriller.
It is awful.
It's this Shattered Memories is like a really compelling psychological thriller with I think like 3 monster chases. You're never attacked in the game. You don't have a weapon.
There's a decent amount. I think it's like 5 or 6, but like a lot of it is more puzzle oriented in terms of gameplay.
Yeah.
Also, fun fact about that game, you can't call a Konami helpline because there is one on the manual, and like they'll be like, "Oh, sorry, you're calling from Silent Hill. I can't help you. You're boned. Goodbye."
Oh my god.
One of my
That's
favorite
awesome.
Easter eggs in a Silent Hill game.
Mm-hmm.
And
Like-
actually, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I didn't have much to.
I was gonna go through like one more case study really quickly.
Okay, well
Just
then I guess I'll
why.
just I was gonna close off and say that Silent Hill really fucks with you because when I was thinking about like PT, rest in peace, just that teaser that you get where it's like you're just repeating the same corridor how many times, and you are just constantly feeling like something is wrong, and every time you go through this corridor, your anxiety and your dread just gets worse. Like you don't need to be in the lens of another character to feel just how fucking awful that is. Like it's terrifying, and I think that's what Silent Hill, to whatever my knowledge is, like that's what they do best, right? And
Yeah.
I wish we got a game out of it.
Me too.
Yeah.
Mine was initially going to be Silent Hill, but I talked with Morgan before about how he's got Silent Hill, so I can touch on it very lightly. But also on the sad thing with PT, there is a scene that we just played, youtube.com/soyboys, in Resident Evil 8 that is almost perfectly like an extension of where PT could have hypothetically gone. I think Morgan Everstone talk about with, the baby convertible.
The baby.
The baby.
The baby.
It's another plug for the Soibois channel, everybody.
Let's go.
This is our catchphrase. We do this and we go, let's go.
Let's go. This is our thumbnail. Let's go.
Actually, when I redesign it, I should make it that. Sheesh. I like that one.
Yeah. All right. Morgan, what's your next case study?
So it's just gonna be really quick because it was probably my favorite essence in like kind of like the active protagonist is Isaac from the Binding of Isaac, and yes, this is like my 3rd time I think bringing it up on this podcast just because it's one of my favorite games of all time.
The indie darling.
Yeah, the indie darling. But the reason why I love Isaac as a character so much is he's the reason why a lot of the game is happening. He's the one that locks himself in the chest. He's the one that goes down the basement. He's the reason why all these enemies look freaky because it's all of his like warped imagination, and it shows just like everything, like how he interacts with an item, like a coat hanger. Oh, you like maybe that's kind of like a weapon. Damage up. Oh no, it's a tears up because he puts it through his skull and he's crying through the pain even more. And just the small things, like how he interprets something, like again, like a belt. Oh, okay, like what would a belt be? Defense up? Oh no, it's a speed up because he's getting smacked with it by his mother. And it's just like Isaac, like he's the one pushing the story. He's the one actively going through everything because he just doesn't know how to handle his shitty home life.
That's really bleak that like he is in some sort of he is at the state of self-awareness where he knows a coat hanger to be an abortion item.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, the Binding of Isaac lore goes hard. The new
I've heard about it. I didn't know they were that visceral with the descriptions though.
Yeah, the final DLC just came out and finally like adds closure to the story and
it goes hard.
What's it called? What gross
it's called
birth?
Repentance.
Repentance? Okay, I was thinking it'd be a gross birth wordplay again.
I didn't realize there was still DLC
the original
for it.
mod it is based on was called Anti-Birth.
Yeah, see, I was thinking like that or like a miscarriage or something gross.
Oh, there's a lot of
it went
in the game.
It went Isaac, it went Rebirth, it went Afterbirth. So.
Also, shout out to the best item in the game, divorce papers. Tears up.
Yeah, shout out to that.
Shout out to divorce
that's
papers.
it for
Shout out to divorce.
Jesus Christ.
Isaac, okay.
Let's go.
Binding of Isaac Rebirth with all its expansions is like $45. Please get it.
Yeah.
It's so good.
If like if you're like for all those listening, if you're just tuning into this episode and you don't know how often Morgan has talked about Binding of Isaac, we have 3 other episodes on that. A little self promo. But yeah, I think Morgan, those were your case studies, right?
Yeah, and I will say this: I will somehow mention the Binding of Isaac during the Shonen anime episode. I swear to God.
Yeah, which is also next week, as of recording this. But yeah, Everest, let's move on to your case study or studies.
Oh boy, I pretty much just had one prepared, but I could maybe talk about something else. We'll see where this goes. But my main case study I want to talk about is I finally get to talk about my favorite game of all time, that being No More Heroes. And I wanted to talk about the protagonist, Travis Touchdown. And so, if you're not, for those of you who are not familiar with No More Heroes, No More Heroes is a game about this dude who becomes an assassin by buying a beam katana on the in-universe equivalent of eBay, and basically just going out and killing people. And so the thing, like the reason why I wanted to talk about Travis Touchdown is because I wanted to kind of touch upon the idea of character relatability and how, you know, like obviously when people see a character they like to imprint themselves onto that character. And this is especially prevalent in like video games. Especially when you get to play as the character, it makes it that much easier for you to make that connection, kind of like imprint yourself onto the character and see yourself in the character. And so Travis Touchdown as a character like was conceptualized by this idea that like they wanted to make a character that was as relatable as possible to the people who would be playing the game. So Travis Touchdown is this character who, you know, he's cool, he's, you know, has a bunch of like sick one-liners, but he's also obsessed with anime. And he loves killing, and you spend a lot of time in his apartment, and it's just filled with anime figures and posters, and it's implied that he basically, if he's not out killing, he basically spends his entire day just watching hentai and, you know, doing what you do.
Yes, that's exactly what our age demographic is. It's porn and murder.
It's our demographic of doing what they do.
Those are the 2 words that sum up Travis Touchdown the best, at least in the first game.
I would say the one word is the one where he's got this big like Madoka style poster and he's just like hugging it like it's his mother. He's just like, Moe.
Yeah. And so
that's the first thing he does actually in the game.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And so the idea with Travis Touchdown is they wanted to make a protagonist that characters would relate to. And that would be a bad thing because they make it very clear in No More Heroes that like Travis Touchdown is not a good person. Travis Touchdown is a horrible person and nobody should be seeing themselves in Travis Touchdown. And if you do, that's not a good thing. And they try to push this narrative really hard. I mean, it's even like in the title of the game, like the title is called No More Heroes. And just Travis Touchdown is not supposed to be somebody that like the players look up to. They're supposed to relate to Travis, and then as the game progresses, they're supposed to kind of come to a realization that like, hey, you know, like I shouldn't be relating to this guy, yet here I am relating to him. And that was the intention. What ended up happening, unfortunately, with No More Heroes is once it came out, people related to Travis Touchdown, and they saw it as a good thing. They were like, "Oh, Travis Touchdown is super cool. I want to be just like him. He's just like me. Oh, that's sick. Oh, I want to be like Travis Touchdown."
Yeah.
And so it kind of backfired on Suda51 in a way, but in another way, it kind of set them up to, in the sequel, kind of like go down this path and play with this idea of like, okay, so now that we have a sequel game, we have No More Heroes 2 coming out. What happens when somebody who should not be idolized becomes an idolized celebrity? And so they kind of play upon that, and there are themes of that within No More Heroes 2. And so now, like, No More Heroes 3 is coming out soon, and it's kind of gone this, like, full arc where, like, Travis Touchdown is this, like, revered figure in the universe of No More Heroes, and he's, like, this legendary assassin, and he's kind of just grown sick of that lifestyle and everything he used to do, and he's now, like, in the most recent game, he's living a much more down-to-earth lifestyle in isolation within the mountains. And so it's just kind of interesting almost how like the fans' reception of this character kind of influenced how he developed as the games progressed, and how like he was originally just supposed to be an image, like a warped image of the player, and he's grown past that. But yeah, just I don't know. I pretty much just wanted to talk about the idea of how he was created to be unlikable and created to be this warped image of the player, but then players actually ended up like really relating to him and really liking him. And I don't know if that was like brilliant on Suda's part, that he like hit the mark so hard that the people playing the game didn't understand what he was like they didn't make the connection that he was basically making fun of them. And yeah, I can't tell if that was brilliant or like completely by accident.
Yeah, if it was a deliberate decision or completely unintentional.
Yeah, I'll say it kind of worked in his favor because you could like. Do you guys know the game Y2K?
Yes.
No.
Okay, so Y2K is very.
Dean would love this game.
For having,
I think Dean would really get a kick out of this game. I'm sorry to interrupt, but like I really think Dean would get a kick out of this.
Oh,
game.
I think he would too. But Y2K is known for having like the main protagonist is supposed to be unlikable. You're supposed to hate him, but it does a good job at that, but at the same time, you don't enjoy the game. You don't enjoy anything that happens to the character. You just hate him. It's like, wait, why is this happening? This is too good for him. Like the ending is kind of makes the main character like self-important. You realize like, oh, I relate to this guy, but he's like unlikable. Like, why would you want anything good to happen to him? Like we're happy. Like, I think Suda's lucky that, you know, Travis didn't become that.
Well, yeah, I think I was gonna say, to tie it back to No More Heroes, I think that's also a testament to Travis Touchdown's character, that like he's made to be unlikable, but he is like still likable in a way. Like, I love Travis Touchdown as a character. I love No More Heroes. It's my favorite game of all time. But like, I understand that Travis Touchdown is not a good person, and I don't relate to him in that way. But I still think he's a thoroughly enjoyable character. And I think like to kind of like spoil a bit of the first game, I think like to really show what kind of a person Travis Touchdown is, like the entire reason No More Heroes 1 happens is that he's literally he does everything he does in that game, and he kills everybody he kills in that game because he's trying to bang a hot girl that he met, and that girl told him to kill those people.
Another driving force for Travis Scott's demographic horniness.
Travis Touchdown, you mean?
Sorry. What the fuck did I say?
You said Travis Scott.
Yeah, fuck you, Travis Scott.
I was a little confused there.
Sorry, Travis Touchdown.
Like I guess some Travis Scott fans could be horny, but they're powered by Big Double.
And there's this great scene at the end of the first No More Heroes game where he meets this girl who's the final boss, or one of the final bosses of the game, and she kind of explains that she's like, "Hey, Travis, like, I'm the girl who killed your parents." And then Travis kind of comes to a realization that he's like, "Oh yeah, that was the reason why like I became an assassin in the first place. I wanted to avenge the death of my parents. I completely forgot about that because I was so busy just trying to bang this girl that told me to kill a bunch of people." And so I like that. I think that's just like, that perfectly shows the type of person that Travis Touchdown is, and just how like terrible of a person he is, and how like you're not supposed to relate to him at all, but yet people still did.
He's just charismatic. He's very charismatic. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I'd like to spoil just a little bit more with the first game and then talk about the other games, and it kind of shows like how much Suda loves to dig this point home that you're not supposed to like this character. Like, the farther Suda goes, the more unlikable he tries to make Travis, and the more people keep flocking to him because he seems to be a fulfilling of everything they feel as people. Like, it feels like the fulfilled entitlement of an entitled crowd, but they're not recognizing this character's very entitled. So like Everest was saying, the whole game is just like this big gaslighting thing where Travis wants to sleep with a hot girl, and the hot girl keeps telling Travis about this like whole organization around assassins, but like it's not. It's literally just like this like trust fund thing a girl set up where she wanted a bunch of people to kill each other because she thought it was funny. And then every single following game, also has Travis in an Assassin's League to kill people. But at the end of the first game, you find out the Assassin's League isn't real. So it's just this constant like looping of the timeline where Travis wants to sleep with this girl. Travis will kill all these people for it, and then it will be fake, and he will learn nothing. And then this is kind of a spoiler for 2, but he ends up sleeping with the girl. But then that shows even further how far Travis is gone as a person, where he sleeps with it like halfway through the second game, and he still goes on to kill all these people because he just wants to keep doing what he wants to do.
Well, and No More Heroes 2 kind of goes through this interesting plotline also of like revenge, because he's trying to avenge the death of his best friend this time.
Oh yeah,
and he goes through all that, but then like the end result, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's just like the end result is so ridiculously and intentionally like unsatisfying that like it kind of like makes Travis like rethink everything that he had done up to that point. He's like, why did I kill all those people? They're like,
we can talk about the opening of No More Heroes too, because you make it sound justified that Travis wants to get revenge for his best friend dying, but like Travis goes on this killing spree where he kills at minimum like 600 people because the guy who rents his videotapes at the Blockbuster was killed.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Like it's not like your best friend, it's not like part of your family. Like yes, this is Travis's best friend, but like aside from when
It's
you
the video
go to
rental,
buy
dude.
like wrestling VHSs from that guy's workplace, you don't see Travis talking with him.
Mhm.
He'd be your best friend the same way that like any other like loser might latch on to someone at like a McDonald's you talk to.
Right. I think to kind of like backtrack just a little bit, there was something that I was hearing about how, you know, Everest was touching on character relatability. We did a episode on villains last week, and pretty much the entire thing, like our, like a big thing with villains nowadays, and just to kind of rephrase some of the talking points from that episode, is that like villains can have absolutely no redeeming qualities, but the fact that there are still some people that sympathize and even empathize with said villain is fascinating as a thing to kind of explore. Because with Travis Touchdown, it's weird hearing all of this shit that he's done, which in you know, by modern standards and probably just like on a basic moral principle, holy fuck, that is a lot. But you know, when it delves into, you know, that's probably just like on a moral thing. When it dives into ethics, like how it does with two examples that we brought up in the episode, Thanos and John Walker from the MCU respectively, it's then when things start to get very interesting in how these characters are written, because just where is it that people start seeing the good in these characters? Like, where is it that, like, while you may not see them, like, while they may not be heroes, and while you're never supposed to think of them as heroes, why are people still relating to them, you know?
Well, I think in Travis's case, one part to it is definitely just his charisma and just how goddamn entertaining he is in almost every scene he's in. And I think another part again is just kind of that like passive sort of connection that you just make with him, because like you do play as him, like he's the protagonist. Like I think he would be so much more unlikable if he was a side character that like showed up in a different game and like you never played as him. Mm-hmm. I think he would just kind of come off as like kind of a dick. It's like he wouldn't be as enjoyable of a character without like I think a big part of it is just kind of the passive connection you get through playing as him. It looks like you want to say something, Michael.
Yeah, it not to be like objection, but Killer 7 was what Suda made like directly before No More Heroes, or maybe like Silver Case was in between. But there is a specific character, I think his name is Travis in Killer 7, and he is written exactly like the way Travis would be written if it was less video game and more just like a general media consumer, like just like shit stain of a person. And I would say I wouldn't say it's the passive relatability you feel from the person playing, but I'd say it's the representation. I'd say it's the representation of person who plays video games and likes niche media as a character in a video game. I feel like that's what draws a lot of people to Travis. Like the thing that was supposed to be a scathing critique about like people who love manga and anime and people who really, really like just these incredibly weird niche mediums and make them their identity. People then were like, wow, there's someone with my identity in a game finally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, that's definitely a huge part of it as well.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good analysis. Just to give a heads up on where we're at time-wise, we've been recording for roughly 2 hours now.
Oh,
yeah. Look,
I'm fine.
I guess our episodes tend to be longer now just because, like, you know, there's a lot to talk about. So, Everest, I guess I'll leave it up to you if you want to dive into another quick case study, if you want to just give it to Michael.
I think I'm honestly just good to give it to Michael. Like I was only prepared to talk about Travis. Travis was the only one really on my list. Like I could talk about other protagonists, but I think it's probably just fine to pass it over to Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Closing
let's hear
segment.
it,
We can
Michael.
just do honorable mentions.
I will pass it to Everest then to
Okay, real quick.
see what he. Okay, go.
I was just gonna say there was actually one that I guess like you mentioning honorable mentions kind of just made me want to briefly mention this because I can't go I physically can't go into the character because it'll spoil huge aspects of it. But
I know what you're talking about.
yeah, just basically I'm a big fan of the Danganronpa series. I played through all the Danganronpa games a couple years ago, and Dean specifically, I think you should check them out. I think you'd really like them. And just the protagonist of the third game specifically, the protagonist of the first and second game like serve their purpose, but like they're pretty much just blank slate characters for the player to like connect with.
Right.
But the protagonist of the third game specifically is like amazing compared to the other two, and just the amount of character development and the amount of like just character it's a great change of pace for the Danganronpa games, but like really just a really great protagonist. And like that's as far as I can go without like spoiling anything, because if I were to talk about the character arc or anything like that, I'll just end up spoiling the entire game, and I wouldn't want to do that to you or Gabe because I'm assuming neither of you guys have played the games. But they're really good. You should check them out, and Danganronpa 3 has an amazing protagonist.
All right, I'll keep that in mind. I guess with that being said, let's hand it off to Michael for his case studies.
So I'm gonna rapid fire machine gun this. Check out my hand movements. I'm going really fast. I got 4, but I have 2 of importance that I will talk about, and I'll do my 2 Silent Hill ones really quick. So I made a joke at the beginning. I don't even know if this is making it in the podcast. Dean can edit in where I said my case study was going to be Pepsi Man, and that was a joke, but my thesis on it wasn't, where I wanted to talk about justification of Ludo narrative relations. So can you in the story justify the character's actions? And I love games that are able to justify more of the character's actions through the story. So for the 2 Silent Hill ones I had, there was Silent Hill 2 versus Silent Hill 4. Silent Hill 2 stars James Sunderland. Spoiler for like a 20-something-year-old game. James... It wasn't James Sunderland, was it? It was James Sunderland?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's James Sunderland.
That's
It was
what,
James.
like the character's name. That is his name. Unless you're going for like the actor, and then no, his name's Guy Seehee.
Guy Seehee. I know Guy Seehee better than James Sunderland, but it's James Sunderland. So he goes to Silent Hill because he went there with his wife a long time ago. His wife died a few years back of like a terminal disease, but he's getting letters from her, and he's like, what's up with this? Why am I getting letters from her? And then spoilers for the game. It's a really big twist, but it honestly doesn't like change. It changes the context of the game, but it doesn't change the quality or the suspense. But you find out at the end of the game, you killed her. She was dying and you killed her, possibly for selfish reasons, possibly for selfless reasons. But the entire time you're going through Silent Hill, you're kind of working through it in your own head. And I love how everything in this game talks about James's mindset. So initially it just comes off as these really creepy creatures, but the more you look into the game and the more you think about James as a character, the creepier it gets, because almost all of the monsters are used with the character model of your dead wife, and they are all models that are women. They are all models that are in different states of undress. They are in different states of sickness, and they can relate to James's feeling towards his wife, towards himself, towards the nurses at the hospital, towards women he met outside of his marriage. There's a side character named Mary, because Maria is his wife, and then there's a side character named Mary who's this like doppelganger that's everything he wanted from his wife that he never got. And I love how everything in the story then justifies how kind of like brutal James is as a character. All he does is he just goes through this game and he kills monsters, and he doesn't really show any type of empathy for other people. But then you start to like delve into his mind and how he is really just constantly wrapped up in his own guilt and his own like poor feelings.
Right.
And I love that. I love how the whole game has a character that seems really passive and really static, but then everything around him is trying to show his character. And then the opposite of that is Silent Hill 4, where Silent Hill 4 takes a letter from Silent Hill 2, or a newspaper strip you find on the ground, and talks about a serial killer that killed a bunch of people. And in 4, they flesh it out to where this serial killer was trying to do a satanic ritual by killing all these people. And you play a random guy who was on that list of people. And I don't even need to bring up his name because, I remember Henry, but, nobody else remembers Henry. Nobody even knows there's a Silent Hill 4. The game really does paint this disturbing picture of a serial killer for 4's villain. But then the whole time, the main character's walking around like, shit, man, I just want to get out of my apartment. And then the game ends and you're outside of the apartment and you just learn nothing about Henry. You don't care about Henry. It's got a great story around it, but you got to drag this ball and chain of a man around with you the whole time. It's terrible.
Nice. Those are nice parallels.
Silent Hill 4 is fine. It is a very fine game.
The lead character, the female love interest, and the escort missions around that kill the game, though. There's so many seeds of beautiful stuff in 4, but it just gets weighed down with boring stuff. It's got more potential than I've seen in any of the Silent Hill games, and a lot of them are great games. But that's just how how boring the stuff in 4 can be, that it could be as good as 2 or 3, but it's just not. So the real studies that I had, which I actually did want to talk in depth about in regards to character agency, which I feel like I'm going to get some big reactions by bringing up the characters, is Francis York Morgan from Deadly Premonition. Morgan's doing the God Killer pose because he's so happy about it. He's going goal. And the second one is Detective Shelby from Heavy Rain. So these two characters actually give me such a strong, complete opposite feeling from each of them. With Francis York Morgan, I feel this absolute kindred feeling whenever I see him on screen or him doing anything, because whatever goofy shit I want to do is goofy shit he wants to do as well. You can see it in the original work, Twin Peaks, as well, where the detective that goes into this small British Columbia looking town and looking for a small town murder among the pines, looking for the killer, but keeps getting distracted because he has the attention span of a 3-year-old, leads to so much potential in a game space. So you can justify as York to go solve the murder. You can go to the local cafe. You can not shower all week. You can live off lollipops. You can just drive through the Rockies talking about David Bowie movies. There's so much potential for just what you want to do, and it makes perfect sense in the story why this person wants to do as well, because York is pretty wacky. I actually have a list of his quotes right here because I just wanted to read them out. For quotes on his wiki page, now that is a good biscuit. I've never tasted a biscuit this delicious. George, which do you prefer, mustard or hot sauce? She'll think you're a psycho. Don't want that, do we, Zach?
Also, keep in mind,
it's just a big list of stuff around food. Friend. That is another thing. If we're getting into the larger Deadly Premonition lore, there is a alternate universe twin that York knows about named Zach, and he talks to Zach, and it's a callback to Twin Peaks because Detective Dale Cooper had a little recorder that he talked to the head of the department called Diane, I think, and he talks to her through like the recorder, but instead York just talks to like the guy in his head. And then at the end of Deadly Premonition, spoilers for the game, but like you somehow switch dimensions with your twin, and then the sequel follows the twin in this world. But that's not too relevant. I'm just talking about the video game and like how York as a character works. I guess it does work as well because any type of exposition makes sense because your parallel universe twin fills in the spot of you in the story. So anytime the main character needs to speak about something or needs something explained, he will talk to the screen about it.
Right.
And so, did anyone else have anything with Deadly Premonition and how the goofy story lets for goofy gameplay?
I'm not familiar with Deadly Premonition personally, so I can't really.
Oh, you need to get on it, Dean. You need to get on it. It is a glorious disaster. 15 frames per second in a.
I don't know if you really need to get in it. You can just watch other people get into it.
I'm gonna look it up on my phone right now, or just like quick little screenshots.
I would highly recommend it. It is a fever dream.
Also,
Gabe
my
knows
favorite part
exactly
of
what
the
I'm
game-
talking about. If he can like recommend people Army of the Dead.
Oh yeah. Oh
Deadly
yeah.
Premonition's a very like watch it because it's bad.
My favorite mechanic in Deadly Premonition is most of the time you're aiming at the dicks of the monsters.
What the fuck?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Dude, fucking look at the protagonist. Look at that guy.
Yeah, look at that handsome man. Look at that handsome
Yeah,
boy.
he looks like he's delivering you mail.
If anyone listening knows what like a lol cow is on the internet, where it's someone that like people on the internet will like follow and make fun of, York feels like a lol cow in a video game. Like it feels like you're following a lol cow and you're just watching like weird shit they do. He feels like a robot in human skin. But it makes sense why you would then just like dick around in this forest for like 25 hours shooting squirrels, because he feels the way you feel when you're playing a video game just for fun. And I love that. I love that cohesion between the play and the story. So if you want to see the exact opposite of this, I'm going to be spoiling Heavy Rain now. And good God. So there's a few protagonists in Heavy Rain. Specifically, there's this one named Detective Shelby, and he's trying to catch the origami killer. Pretty standard setup for a thriller. There's a serial killer. He kills people when it's raining. He's the origami killer because he leaves little origami things wherever that person was. And so as you play Detective Shelby, and it's a big thing with every type of Quantic Dream game, there will be these buzzing articles around the person's head that you can click on for a prompt, and that person will then say their thoughts. So right away, it's a big thing for you to get into the head of the character, and you want to be in their headspace. And that's completely fine. It just adds the extra weight of being consistent with that character, because now you are that character. You know exactly what they're thinking and how they're feeling. You can switch this out somewhat if the character is unreliable, like if you had a Fight Club situation where the character didn't know about a mental illness they had or something outside of their like point of view. But that doesn't really work for Heavy Rain, because at the end of the game you find out Detective Shelby is actually the origami killer, and he doesn't have any sort of illness. He's very aware that he's the killer. He just wasn't thinking about it. It works the way that someone who has like a split personality disorder would, but he doesn't have a split personality disorder. He's very aware of what he's doing. Like he has a very clear cut motivation. He doesn't have any type of like disorder or like not stipulation, but like he's not stimulated to do it. Like it's not like any sort of stress can bring on the trauma. He just does it because he wants to. And that just kills the game's steam. So it takes the wind out of the game's sails so fast.
Oh yeah.
Because you're really on board to find out in this thriller who the killer is, but you've known right from the start. They just said, no, he's not the killer. Thriller should usually have you following a breadcrumb trail, but in this situation, they didn't give you a breadcrumb trail. They just gave you a list of people, and at the end, they pointed out who it was. And at the beginning, they're like, it's not this person.
They gave you, you were supposed to get a breadcrumb trail, and instead they gave you a tuna sandwich from Subway.
Yeah.
I don't know what sense that makes.
That they picked up off the ground.
Yeah. Oh my
Instead
god.
of a trail of
Ew.
breadcrumbs, just one sandwich off the ground.
Ew. Oh my god.
Like I could talk about the characters in the story and about their personality, but like it's a Quantic Dream game. If you play one of them, you play all of them. The characters don't have too much to them.
Yeah, I think
Nom and Jaden.
Nom
Yeah.
and Jaden.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about like agency, Michael, yeah, Quantic Dream especially, because I don't know enough about Deadly Premonition, but I do know Quantic Dream. Agency isn't something that is like, it might be there, but it's almost like a ghost sometimes. Because when in terms of agency, the ones that like I haven't really seen yet, which agency is a big drive when you're telling a narrative. Like there has to be some kind of importance to this story. Like there has to be some things that like motivate these characters. And maybe the only sense of agency that I really saw was in Detroit. But aside from that, agency in these in Quantic Dream games isn't really there like from the beginning, or maybe it's just kind of askew. Because I remember in Beyond Two Souls when they had, I forget who Elliot Page's character was, but
Jody?
yeah, Jody, yeah. So Jody's character, like the pacing of Jody's story was kind of all over the place. So I couldn't really keep up with her agency. But with Detroit, it was a lot clearer, the agency between the three characters. Like it had a better balancing between the three. And it's been a while since I played Heavy Rain, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe Quantic Dream just has an agency problem.
I think it's so funny that you would use the analogy of a ghost for the agency of Quantic Dream games, because they've done two different games where you are technically playing a ghost and then completely forget like the basic narrative mechanics of a ghost simply for, you know, like, of course, technical restrictions, but also a loss of agency. So there was, of course, Beyond Two Souls, where you are playing Elliot Page as like a spy, and so there's the ghost, which is Aiden, and Aiden has all these situations of somewhat agency where he's able to help Jody in these certain situations, but not too much. It's really just stuff she could have done herself. And there's very little like expanded story around, you know, like the military using ghosts. But then there's also Omicron, the Nomad Soul, which was literally sold on how much agency there is supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to interact with hundreds of people because you are a ghost going from body to body. And it just doesn't have that. You go through like 3 or 4 people. The changes in between them are just very static, and the people themselves might as well just be like square boxes. They're not meant to have personality.
Yeah, which sucks, because as a narrative, agency is something that is a driving force behind characters. It's what adds tension. It's what, you know, defines characteristics. And when you fuck up agency, then you've almost fucked up your story. Right, like it's kind of like if you fuck up the pacing of a story, or it's like if you fuck up like the ending. Like agency is something that you really should not fuck up, and it's upsetting to hear that like Quantic Dream is getting better at it, but has had a terrible history with messing with it. Because I've only ever played like the more notable Quantic Dream games, but damn. If you fuck up agency, then you're so close to fucking up your story. And like, it's not like they had really much else to begin with. Like, I wasn't really a big fan of like the early Quantic Dream characters. Like, it visually was stunning, but like, we've kind of moved past that at a point nowadays, because like a lot of games, like I said earlier, are like visually incredible. And like, if for Quantic Dream, who's taken this approach to more cinematic interactive stories rather than video games, despite, you know, still being video games, like you would kind of expect that story would be like the biggest thing that they would need to focus on, because you don't have like flashy gameplay elements, you don't have big monster boss fights to, you know, add to the tension. It's just story. So when you fuck it up, everyone critiques you on that, because that's the one thing that people are like buying your product for, right?
I would say it mechanically it's a bit more formulaic, but story wise it's got a lot more tension. If you try the first like 4 or 5 hours of Fahrenheit, which I think is also called the Indigo Prophecy,
Yes.
I think the first bit of Fahrenheit might be the best that Quantic Dream has done. Like, it does go off the rails and it goes in this like weird Maya 2012 bullshit where you're like flying through the air and doing this Dragon Ball fight. Spoilers for Indigo Prophecy.
Oh, that
the
sounds
first, like,
great.
the first like 4 or 5 hours where you're just a man who like blacked out in a bathroom and killed somebody and you're on the run is so just like tight in everything it's trying to do. And future Quantic Dream games went on this like very famous quote that David Cage, the director, said, where like fail states are, what's the line, Morgan?
Failures are
game overs are failures of game design.
There you go.
There we go. That's the line. And they started implementing it in like every single Quantic Dream game post Heavy Rain, where like characters can fail, but there isn't a real chance of failing. Like, you need to fail QTE after QTE, or you need to fail something really big or something incredibly easy. I would say though, Detroit does let you fail, and I really like that. Like, your character can just die and then the story goes on with the other characters. That is such a good idea. But
God.
Fahrenheit has it where you'll just like fail and the game's over and you just got to restart the level. I like that a lot. I like the fail state showing that there is some form of tension to you making it out of these situations. Or
Wait, that's not how it happened.
Yeah, that's how it literally.
I thought Everest, you were actually saying that to me. Oh my gosh.
Is that an Indigo Prophecy where that happens?
That is it.
Yes.
In
Yeah.
Indigo
You get
Prophecy,
killed by your
if you
furniture, and it'll be like,
or no,
that's not how it
no,
happens.
that's what they say in Prince of Persia, because I talked about this last time I was on the podcast, where in Prince of Persia you'll die, but in Prince of Persia they're saying the story to someone else, so they'll say, wait, that's not how it happens, and then time backs up.
I swear it's also an Indigo Prophecy.
They
But
kind of do it.
in Indigo Prophecy they say, well, that's the end of my story.
Right.
So like, if you were like running across rooftops and you miss the QTE and you fall down, the guy's like, I wasn't fast enough. I slipped on a ledge and I broke my neck and I'm dead now, and that's my story. And it's a little goofy in certain spots, but it does show like there is consequence to what happens. Like, you will kill your story halfway through if you mess this stuff up, and it gives a lot of tension, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. And agency. Like, it
I know
just
there's
makes... Sorry, Michael, go ahead.
There's that one really famous scene in Beyond Two Souls where like Jodie's running from the military and she's just like eating shit on every single branch and every single rock, but she's outrunning these guard dogs. And like, you can just miss every single QTE, but she is running way faster than these motorcycles ever could.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, like what I was going to elaborate, it basically just goes back into what we were talking about with agency. Like, it seems like, or agency and consequence, because that's also another important thing when you were talking about, or when you're discussing story in general. Like, consequence is something that is important to not just determining the outcome of the plot, but also helping characterize your characters. Because if you just have all of them live without consequence, then that's just fucking boring. They essentially become just a perfect character, and perfect characters in theory are nice, but in execution no one ever really invests in them. So losing agency and losing consequence just makes your game bad, guys.
Very true, very true.
Morgan, were you going to add on to something? Sorry, I was talking over you.
No, I was probably just gonna make a joke about David Cage.
Do it.
Not the biggest fan.
Everyone has. You might as well.
I was gonna say probably peaked, like, for a while he peaked with Indigo Prophecy, which is the saddest part, until Detroit happened.
Yeah.
And it just makes me laugh knowing that a lot of the best parts with Hank and Connor were mostly improvised, and David Cage hated those sections, but he kept them in because like the QA response to it was positive.
Like, he reached unironic meme status during the time of Detroit coming out, not because of a joke, but because of the enjoyability of this character. Like he was almost an official like Tumblr sexy man because of how much people just unironically liked Connor's character. I see Dean loved that one, and I said Tumblr sexy man. And yeah, like it's really impressive to see people like across the board like something that Quantic Dream did, because they missed the point so many times. I got to give them credit for the experimenting, but they missed the point so many times, and to see like them get it so well on this, but it's actually just one of the actors doing improv is very funny.
On a completely I was just gonna say, on a completely unrelated note, I will never forgive myself for running into the actor that played Connor at E3 and not realizing it and asking for like a picture or something. Because I was literally like face to face with him. I like bumped into him while he was like with his wife going somewhere, and I was like, oh, that looked like, because he was dressed up as Connor, and I was like, oh wow, that's a really good cosplay of Connor. He looks exactly like Connor. And then I found out later, I was like, oh, that was literally Connor.
Oh my god.
So anyways, that was just completely unrelated note, but I'll never forgive myself for not getting a photo.
His name's Brian Decker, right?
Yeah, Brian
That's
Decker.
what his name is? Yeah, he seems like a chill guy.
Yeah, I was gonna say though, how many games? It took a bunch of games for Quantic Dreams to like actually do a good like buddy cop like crime drama properly.
That's true. Like buddy cop is the genre they've gone to for almost every mainline game.
Almost every game. With, like,
and then they got it right once
from
because they let the actor have a bit of improv.
I mean, major props to the actors too. Brian Deckard and what's the other guy?
Clancy Brown.
Yeah, Clancy Brown. They're both amazing.
Jeff Bridges.
No,
Jeff Bridges.
No, Clancy Brown. He's Mr. Krabs.
Mr. Krabs.
You can have
that's Mr. Krabs.
It is.
Yeah. You can have a shit director, but good chemistry saves your art. Or saves your media.
Very true, very true. I think that's one thing that I guess I would have liked to talk about in the section at the beginning where we were just talking about like video game protagonists compared to like film protagonists or book protagonists. But it's like, I think especially nowadays, you know, there's a lot of props that should be given to the actors that portray a lot of these characters too.
Absolutely.
Even in voice acting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think like let's start wrapping up the episode by kind of going back then, just discussing, like voice actors deserve so much praise. Like another small reason why I love Aloy is because she's voiced by Ashley Birch, and I adore Ashley Birch so much. But more than that, like motion capture definitely helps. Like Nathan Drake is one of my favorite video game protagonists because, you know, Nolan North doesn't just voice him, but mocaps him. It's like there's so much personality with video game characters that like makes them so special. Like you don't just listen to them speak, right? Like you don't just get into their head sometimes. Like you can act, like the fact that you can control their like sick mannerisms or like see their little nuances and their interactions with characters, that just makes them hella cool to watch, right? Like it, like kind of a quick side tangent, but I guess that's what makes like gameplay videos so cool, is because even though you're just watching someone else play the game, it's still the same kind of thing where you're experiencing the protagonist in a way that books and TV shows still can't really do. So
I thinking of how like your voice kind of fluttered with Ashley Birch, I appreciate so much. I'm gonna have my own like gushing really quick with this. I appreciate in a post Thanos world how now like video game movie protagonists that are like completely obtuse in their concept are still given the treatment of showing that they are character actor parts. So like with Thanos, you still saw like, aside from those like chin ripples, it's Josh Brolin. It's just 100% Josh Brolin, but he's big and purple. And it makes me think a lot to Death Stranding, because you can talk about Death Stranding forever, but like Death Stranding feels like the culmination of 25 years of Kojima wanting to do that type of like character actor led story where like it's not just a couple of boxes making up Solid Snake. It's not like a pretty well rendered human that looks kind of like David Hayter. Like, this is Mads Mikkelsen, and there's no like other type of argument. This character in Death Stranding, Clifford Unger, that's Mads Mikkelsen playing a character. I could show my parents and they'd know that's Mads Mikkelsen. I love Troy Baker finally getting to just like show his face and just be a regular looking guy, and he plays it up so well. Because Troy Baker's been doing just kind of regular Nolan North style protagonists all decade, and he was allowed to just go all out with Higgs for Death Stranding, and he is fucking nuts, and it's fantastic. And then Norman Reedus isn't the best actor in the world, in my opinion, but he still does what he does really well in Death Stranding. It's great. It's just a big character actor movie, but you're playing it.
Yeah. On that, actually, two other, I guess, quickfire mentions. Troy Baker in general is just a powerhouse of a. I don't even know what to call like video game voice actors who also mocap. I guess just like actors. I guess I'll just generalize. Yeah. So so like Troy Baker and Nolan North are like phenomenal actors for video games, but Troy Baker especially, like he is Joel.
Yeah.
Like he is like through the beginning of the first from the first game all the way up until 2, he just embodies that character well. And like, you know, through interviews, and like no one expected Troy Baker to carry Joel as well as he did. And he killed it. Like his legacy has been solidified through Last of Us, if not for any other games. Another example
that voice is my all-time favorite Persona character.
Yeah, let's say like before The Last of Us, he was pretty prolific anime voice actor and just like JRPG like voice actor. It kind of sucks that he's lost like that his like roots, but I'm happy to see him hit the big times.
I was shocked when I watched like the recent Code Geass movie and I saw him return as Schneisel. I was like, holy shit! I can't believe he's doing an anime again. This is like whew,
the stars align.
Because they could have got like Travis William or like any other like voice they've gotten before to replace him, but nah, he returned.
That's how
he's unfortunately like he's in like one scene in that movie, but like it's still like holy shit, Troy Baker in an anime, fucking mad.
OG.
Nice. I think one other oh my god.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of cut you off there.
No, it's all right. Just like another quick person that I wanted to talk about in terms of performance and bringing nuance and amazingness in general to a video game protagonist is Christopher Judge in the latest God of War games. Like I've gushed about Kratos before on his lineage as a protagonist and his journey from a no-nonsense murderous fuckhead to a grounded, vulnerable father. And Christopher Judge embodies that in a way that I cannot ever see anyone else do that. Like not just through his voice acting, obviously, but being able to mocap the man himself and bring that vulnerability and emotional attachment that no one really expected Kratos to ever have is a testament to just how good the writing, the storytelling, the man himself is.
I think this helps with Christopher Judge that he just looks like Kratos in the real life.
Oh yeah.
he can get into that mindset because he's clearly a man forged in iron already.
Yeah. Shout out to Troy Baker, Christopher Judge, Ashley Birch. If you ever listen to these, thank you for your work. Y'all are amazing.
Also, I could do a whole episode just gushing about voice actors. I love voice actors.
Same.
Yeah. Maybe that'll be a Soibois podcast episode.
Write it down, Morgan.
Yeah. I'll deadass help you guys plan out like a season if you want. I've been doing this for like 4 seasons.
Yeah.
Well, actually, one more thing for voice actors. And I guess this is going to be an honorable mention. And it gives me an excuse to pull this out. Shout out to my favorite voice actress, an Atlas Faithful.
Oh, no.
Karen Strassman.
Is she there right now, Morgan? Is she there in the studio?
No, but she voices one of my favorite characters.
That's
Tigus.
Put that away.
I bought that for him.
No, Tigus is one of my favorite characters, and that's because Karen Strassman's performance is pretty freaking amazing, and Persona 3 and Persona 3 Fest like the answer.
I don't know what the fuck you said because I can't believe you brought in a.
The absolute madman.
I can't believe you brought in the real Persona actress. To
Oh my god! Yeah, holy shit!
It's also like, yeah, okay.
Do you have to pay a lot for her to like appear for 5 seconds and not say anything?
I mean, she did show up in one episode of Silicon Valley, so.
I mean, I was the one that bought the pillow, so.
Yeah, blame this guy. This guy's fault.
Morgan. Okay, so like point your finger a little bit because Everest is a little bit more. Move it to your right.
Other side, Morgan.
Okay, now
keep going.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, blame it
for me. Blame that guy.
You're pointing at me, Everest.
Am I?
Yeah.
Yes.
I know he's.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Video is fun. All right. I think that's all I really wanted to bring up to kind of close off the episode. Anything else you guys wanted to bring up or?
No, I think that's pretty good. I already mentioned my honorable mention like a while ago.
I'd like to do a whole episode around the inverse and talk about video game movies and what you can fill in that agency space.
Oh, I thought you were like if for the inverse of video game protagonists, there's video game antagonists.
I'd be down to do an episode on that as well, actually.
Yeah, let's do the Silent Hill 4 one.
Yeah,
it's genuinely interesting how like there's all this shit around Silent Hill games. Then in 4 they just completely sidetrack it with this one singular character. He's cool.
Nice.
All right.
Who knows if we can't do the idea, then again, Soibois Podcast whenever that comes up. I really will help you guys out with that if you want.
Yeah. I mean, Morgan's the one that's gotta set it all up, so
yeah.
Then I gotta do the thumbnail and then the animation. Then
I mean, you have the thumbnail already. You just need the animation.
I can do a better one than that.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. I paid you for it already.
Let me do like a little opening then, like a little animated opening.
Yeah, it'll work. I'm sure it'll work.
Yeah.
This is a good discussion with everybody.
Good talk.
Yeah, let's start closing off then. So thanks everybody for listening in. It's been, I guess, a nice debut for putting video on the podcast because it was a lot more interactive, I think. Yeah. Thank you to Morgan, Everest, Michael, and of course Gabe for joining us tonight. You can find our social media down in the description below. Both. Oh, I turned off my camera. That's embarrassing. So, you can find all of our social media down in the description below, both as the InkGuild, myself individually, Gabe individually, as well as the Soibois here, their channels, both as Soibois and individually. Just as a plug, Michael has released a book, which I'll let him talk about.
Yes, that's true. There was that point. Good. I don't need to talk about Dark Souls 2. So a few months ago, I got to get together with my friend Philip, and we made a kid's book. It is called Take a Walk with a Tikbalang. It is a story about traditional Filipino folklore. It's a nice little kid's story / art book. So you could really give it to anyone as a present at any age. I have lots of people who would like to get a copy simply for the just art in it because
it's very pretty.
I very much enjoyed just wasting away like almost 2 months on the project. It was so nice to just kind of relish in like how weird and kooky the folklore can be, how deep the world can be, and then how beautiful the Philippines is as well. For anyone who's interested in like traditional Filipino language, there is also Tagalog annotations in it, so you can learn about the language and the folklore while you're reading the book. I currently have a shipment coming in the next day or two, but I will be getting more shipments in the future, so you can let me know if you would like a copy through the Facebook, through the Instagram. You can message anyone on the Soibois or InkGuild, and they can hand out my number or my email as well.
Yep. I guess that's Michael's big project. We didn't do this in the beginning, but I guess as a check-in, which, you know, for our listeners is kind of where we just talk about what we've been working on. again, I'm still working on Xeno, which many of like my friends in general are familiar with. The easiest way to kind of get an access point on that, on me kind of like your earliest glimpses into Xeno, is just by listening to the InkGuild podcast, which is again just a meta self plug. But if you want snippets of my development with said story, you're always more than welcome to just listen in, because I really having your own podcast and talking about your own story gives all of us a lot of leeway into how much we can share. So with that being said, Gabe, is there anything you want to plug specifically?
No, nothing to plug. No major develops in any of my projects lately.
Not major. Yeah, but he does still have stories, such as Lemonheart, for example.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I've been working on Lemonheart a little bit more recently. So still aiming for an end of 2021 release. So
yeah. Morgan and Everest Michael, if you guys want an absolute batshit story, listen, like,
wait, have I not told you guys the premise of it?
Okay, we can save that. We can save that for after the podcast, because that's just like, for our audience, they already know what the premise of Lemonheart is.
Was that the one that you sent me, Gabe, or something else?
No, that was a short story that I sent you.
Okay.
All right, Morgan, anything specifically to plug? Aside from the Soibois channel.
Besides the Soibois channel, people are with the release of the remake of Replicant. I'm gonna actually plug the original port, or the original release of Nier Gestalt, or just Nier in North America. Because personally, I am more comfortable with Father Nier compared to One-chan Nier. No, but seriously, like, give at least, if you play Replicant, give the original Gestalt a try, just to see the differences, because they're actually they're not the most significant, but they're interesting. Like the one line where Emil's like, "Hey, I would want to marry you," and Replicant that just randomly shows up, and it never shows up in Gestalt, because Nier's like a 40-year-old man in that game.
I think when he was talking about stuff to plug, he meant like stuff we're working on.
No, too bad. Plugging is different. No, but
yeah,
I don't know.
I can talk about. Yeah, so if for everyone listening, Soibois have been doing like a lot of cool stuff lately. Like they're releasing Resident Evil 8 content soon, and they could use. Yeah, they've got videos on other things. They've released memes, and also be patient with them, as they are also just as busy as we are. So,
okay, replace the word busy with lazy, because I'm very lazy.
To be fair, I am also lazy, and I am the main editor for this channel. So yeah, I completely understand. But yeah, just they're worth checking out. So go ahead and give them a subscribe too.
You know what? Actually, we got a big announcement that's never before seen for InkGuild Podcast only. Big brand new announcement. World premiere. Coming soon. World's End Club Let's Play on Soibois. Check that out. Coming soon.
That'll probably come out the day the game is released. So that would be the Friday. That would be May 28th.
That is a world's first premiere announcement. Never before seen. That wasn't even in the Soibois Direct.
This guy's just leaking info.
Yeah. I'll be sure to clip that, because this episode is going up on the 28th.
Oh, I will make
actually, by the 28th, I think we should. By the 28th, the first episode will either be out or in the works.
Yeah, I'll clip it for our social media, because of all places, TikTok really engages with our content.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
TikTok.
You guys should sign up for it. It's actually like a pretty good marketing tool. There are a lot of like-minded people who like the algorithm reaches. So
cool. I'll have to check that out. Do some Soibois TikToks.
Ooh, if I'm gonna plug anything, follow my Twitter. Morgan does stuff.
Follow Morgan's Twitter. Follow our individual social media.
I'm sorry for the not safe for work stuff I like to follow.
Just don't look at that.
Yeah.
In terms.
Sorry.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, in terms of stuff I want to plug. I mean, I've been working on designing Team Fortress 2 maps. if you're ever interested in checking those out or playing on them, there's a server for it. If you look up TF2 Maps, Discord server, I like to test my maps on there every once in a while. Other than that, I'm working on a game project, but I can't talk about it too much, so hopefully I'll have more to say about it next time we show up here, possibly.
All right.
Thinking of, or is this a different one?
It is not Qbot, if that's what you're wondering.
Okay, I don't know if we can name it by name.
All right. I guess as a quick closing segment, let's talk about some quickfire video game protagonists. I didn't talk about Joel from The Last of Us, but really Joel as a character has been discussed to death plenty of times. I can't wait to see Pedro Pascal portray him in HBO's series.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
I can't wait for all of us to portray Last of Us characters.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Aside from Joel, as I am also playing through Nier Automata, 2B and 9S, they have a very interesting character dynamic that I'm really interested in exploring. But this is currently being recorded on the 26th, so probably when this episode goes out at some point, I could be devastated.
How far into Nier are you? Real quick.
I'm only in the first couple hours. I've gone through the desert and cleared the fucking machines that are there. But I've also been to that little sand area where suddenly there are a whole bunch of machines acting like people, and said machines kind of merge into this giant thing and then birth like their own machine.
Yeah,
so that's where I'm at.
You saw Adam
Okay.
and Eve. You saw Eve, I think it is, right? Or Adam?
I think Adam's the
Which is
first one.
Yeah, Adam's
it's like the guy
Adam's
that-
the first one.
Yeah.
Eve is the screamy boy.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Okay.
Yeah.
that's where I'm at with Nira. But yeah, those are my
Okay.
quick honorable mentions. Gabe, how about you?
I didn't talk about either of my Capcom boys because as much as I love them, they're not exactly rich. Dante and Chris Redfield are not exactly rich protagonists, but I love them with all my
Dante's
heart.
not deep.
Dante has layers to him.
He's got pizza. He's got
He's got-
pool.
He's got
Yes.
pizza. He's got pool.
He murders
he does
his brother.
wacky woohoo pizza, man.
It
Love
says
that guy.
something deep about someone who has a business in the age of the cell phone and has a rotary phone, and he kicks the phone into his hand.
He does.
That
It's-
says something about a character.
It's incredible. I love that cutscene so much. I didn't talk about Kazuma Kiryu either. I could have talked about him, but again, I wasn't really sure what to talk about other than I think that whoever is in charge of the animations for him in the cutscenes is a fucking genius.
I think all your points around Agent 47 transfer pretty well to Kiryu.
Probably,
Like,
yeah.
Kiryu is this very like hardened, traumatized man, and it's very clear that he just likes to connect with the people in his prefecture. So like it's just this like really hardened, like tattooed, chiseled from rock man, and he's just singing these like goofy pop tunes at the karaoke bar, and he's going to pachinko parlors.
And he just has like the most insane fucking batshit animations I've ever seen in a fucking character. I don't know what it is that cracks me up so much about him. I didn't get to talk about who else was on my list. I had a long fucking list. I was gonna talk about Vincent from Catherine. I was gonna minorly talk about Walker from Spec Ops: The Line, but I didn't feel like going into a Spec Ops: The Line deep dive tonight. So yeah, that was my honorable mentions.
Morgan, how about you?
So yeah, actually, I was probably gonna talk. I almost talked about Kasuga Ichiban, the protagonist of Yakuza 7, Like a Dragon. Just because he is a character that influences the combat system because he is so delusional that he treats everything like an RPG battle, and that is amazing.
Nice.
There's also Amori or Sunny from Amori, but I can't really go into that without spoilers. And I recently got back into Guilty Gear with the upcoming release of Strive. So my boys Soul and Kai, they're some of my favorite fighting game protagonists. More so Kai because he marries an 8-year-old canonically.
Nice.
I'm not going to go into detail about why.
That's a choice.
You shouldn't. Someone.
No, the meme.
Oh my
meme
God.
is she's like she's half machine, and they like age much faster.
I see.
All right. Yeah, there's the justification.
Open with that next.
I just want to see the reactions.
Oh my God. All right, Everest.
I mean, again, I was pretty much just ready to talk about Travis Touchdown. That's about it. But looking like thinking about some other protagonists, I really, really would like to talk about Phoenix Wright, but I haven't played all the games yet, so I feel like I wouldn't be able to do him justice.
Ooh, I'd love
Wordplay.
And along with that too, this is another sort of kind of same with like the Danganronpa 3 protagonist, but I really want to talk about the protagonist of another visual novel game that was published by the same company that published Danganronpa. That was AI, the Somnium Files. The protagonist in that game is also really, really good, but I can't go too much into it without spoiling like everything about the game. So yeah, those are probably my picks.
All
you
right.
can talk about he's addicted to porno magazines.
I mean, yeah, but
Oh yeah, it'll blow your
doesn't-
mind when we talk about Lionheart later.
I already talked about Travis Touchdown. I can't do another.
All right, Michael, let's round it off with yours.
I'm just going to talk about Travis Touchdown and being addicted to porno magazines. No, I was going through my list, and I feel quite confident I was able to talk with everyone, especially since I got 4 fucking studies in this episode. But I'd like to hammer home the thing that I did last episode, as well as when I was talking with Gabe about like Agent 47. I love worlds that will just like curl in their aesthetic based on a long-running joke with the character. So like Doom is a very hardcore shooter, and I love how Doom has just like patchworked on every single like metal stereotype. Like it tries to look like every single band's album cover at the same time, and it has this disgusting like hardcore music. And then right at the center, the vector of all of this is a man who has nothing to his character. It's literally just that he's angry. There's metal music in his brain, and he just needs to kill stuff. I think that's so funny in its simplicity. I was looking at my list of games over there, and I'd like to talk about Solid Snake, but I technically want to talk about everything and nothing. Like he's a very deep character. There's a very long story around him and his past and his future.
We could do an entire podcast just talking about Solid Snake.
But there's no like singular point I want to make with it. Like he's interesting. It's a interesting story. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. Kirby, shout out to Kirby. I think it's so funny that he's such like a simple character, and similar to like Doom and other long running series I talked about, where like they take these jokes that are just like offhanded things written during a 16-bit era and flesh them out to be like true lore, where Kirby has this like underlying story about like Lovecraftian monsters, because they thought it would be really funny if some of Kirby's monsters in the old games looked kind of creepy and scary and they were from space, and they just kept conflating it to this point where like Kirby has like real like Nyarlathotep Yog Sothoth style like god killing gods in it. I think
Fucking hell, I never thought of it like that.
Most of the
Kirby lore runs so deep.
Most of what I'm talking about is not really protagonists themselves, but like interplay between protagonist and story.
Yeah.
So like Doom, I think it's funny that Doom guy's so simple, but his world's so big and angry, just like him. And then Kirby's so simple, but then the world is just like so dark, and he is just easily able to eat all of it. It's inspiring.
Very inspiring.
Was there one more I was gonna do? I have Asura's Wrath. There's also not much to the character. I like the anger, and I think it's very cartoonish to take the lore of like the most famous Buddhist and Hindu battles and make them into these like just balls to the wall action anime series.
God, I haven't done Azura's Wrath in so long.
Sorry, there's a guy yelling at me outside. And then the final one that I saw over there was Alan Wake, which like it really gets into spoiling when talking about Alan Wake, but Alan Wake's kind of ripping off a lot of Stephen King stories, and I always like how a lot of Stephen King stories have writers as the main characters. I love protagonists that are creators. because I'm a creator. Lots of my friends are creators, so it relates to us to have someone who makes things and understands narrative to be a lead. And it gets even more interesting because the setup for Alan Wake is it's a guy who's in, I think his car breaks down. No, his wife gets kidnapped when they're on vacation out in the forest, and he's wandering the forest looking for her. And he keeps picking up these pages, and the pages are for a novel he never started. And the novel describes what's happening as he goes through the forest. So like it talks about like a street light he sees, and it talks about how like he tears his pant leg on like a tree, and then it's like there's a guy behind me with an axe. He's about 50 feet behind me, but I don't hear him yet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really cool. That is atmosphere along with protagonist, but also I really like protagonists that are creators. I think that's everything for me.
Yeah. Shit, there's a lot to talk about actually. Like season 5, like, you know, on for the InkGuild podcast, we've been talking about like, oh, what are we gonna do for season 5? Because we had so like through these long discussions, we've had so much potential for season 5, and for only 12 episodes, we kind of have to keep it depending. So who knows? Maybe for everyone who's been listening, if these ideas don't make it into season 5 of the InkGuild podcast, maybe it'll make it into season 1 of the Soibois podcast. But yeah, with all of that being said, I guess let's just call it for the night. So thanks everybody for listening in, and have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Guys.
Bye guys.
Make a nappy.